we'll receive a full report from Mr. Hamill at our regular meeting, as we usually do, and review the KPIs. But any questions or comments to the March financials as they've been shared with us?
I'll just comment and say it looks like things are, as Larry would say, things are kind of evening out. You have fluctuations and it kind of smooths out toward the end. Right. And so we are smoothing out at a surplus of close to 400,000 according to KPIs.
Great, thank you. Then moving on to section F, policy. We have several policies, regulations, exhibits to be posted for public review for 4 weeks. From our policy committee, any comments or additions about these policies?
I've got one.
Sorry, let me go ahead and read through
Sure.
through them just so we're all on the same page. This is policies JCDA, Student Code of Conduct, and the Code of Conduct draft. Policy GBRIG, Federal Family and Medical Leave Act. Policy GBRH, Professional Personal Leaves of Absences. Leaves and absences. Sorry, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I know when we're talking about the code of conduct that we're in the time, it's very time sensitive. At the last policy meeting, we did talk about, and I knew it was something that's going to take a while to integrate in, but when we talked about somehow or the other fleshing out the restorative justice practices piece, has there been any changes based on what perhaps if those could be highlighted, or maybe they are and I just don't see it.
So I consulted with the Georgia Conflict Center, Danny Malek and John Lash, to look at the section in the Code of Conduct that speaks to restorative practices, to ask their professional opinion on does that accurately reflect where we are as a district and our practices, and they said that it does. There's a couple minor suggestions that they have, and what I had intended to do was put them in as part of kind of the public comment that will be reviewed as the code is finalized in a month. So there's certainly time to make suggestions. I kind of just deferred to our experts who are in the schools working on restorative practices of how that language should best be reflected in the code. I'm happy to forward to the board their comments.
Yeah, that would be helpful. The other thing is, and I don't know how to do it, so I guess you maybe shouldn't ask about something that you know how to do yourself, but we talked about, certainly not now because it would take a lot of time, but integrating in more in terms of the document. Because what we did in the Code of Conduct is that we had a very appropriate, nice section on restorative justice practices, but then it doesn't work its way through the entire document. And I don't know how to do it. I know there's a matrix there, and I don't know if it belongs there.
I know what you're speaking of, Mr. Davis, and so the matrix has progressive discipline steps, and restorative practices should really underlie all of those progressive disciplines. It's not an either or. It's not either we issue a consequence or there's restorative practices. Right. They should undergird as a philosophical base, just like PBIS and other kind of philosophical practices to our discipline. And so we're hesitant to put it in as an option that looks like a dichotomy of either it's an in-school or an out-of-school suspension or a restorative conference. It's not that binary. So I would like to have more conversations about how it can be reflected so that people understand the use of the restorative practices throughout the discipline process.
See, I think with the Code of Conduct, what I'm finding out, and I'm finding out a lot through Dr. Means, like going there yesterday and at his dialogue with the community, that we've got, some schools that have really are way into PBIS, and they're actually PBIS schools, or they're working to be. Some schools are not. We've got some schools that really practice restorative justice, like we found out, at the meeting we had early in the week. And so there's kind of an unevenness that I know can also reflect what Dr. Means said last night, was that it's kind of like it's uneven throughout the district. And so, and so I know he's aware of it. I know you're aware of it. I know we want schools to have their own individuality, but at the same time, we don't want to be in a situation like we heard one teacher say where she goes into, at least I heard her say, you go into one classroom and the rules are here, and you go into, and then next door, the other classroom, that teacher has different rules. And so we don't, and the way that they're carried out. So we certainly don't want that to be significant within our school system.
Sure.
So y'all
Last
know
year,
all
we
that.
conducted a readiness assessment across all of our schools, a restorative practices readiness assessment with the Georgia Conflict Center, and so certain schools were identified as having the conditions and investing the resources through like their innovation funds to be right for moving forward more intensive restorative justice work. They all practice restorative practices, and all of our administrators have had training on restorative practices, but the intensity and the additional staff allocated has been a school-based decision, just as it is with allocating their title or other discretionary funds
Also,
for other
PBIS,
initiatives.
I'm assuming PBIS has a cost to it as well.
Well, we've been supporting that as a district,
Okay.
the 6 schools that were selected
Okay.
as statewide schools.
Okay.
But yes, I hear you.
Yeah, no.
Okay, yes, on the policies?
Yeah, I think related to that, with the district, you mentioned that the district is supporting PBIS more at a district, I guess, level, and the restorative practices and the degrees in which that sort of implemented in schools has been basically actually the schools.
Well, all of our administrators, all of our support staff, all of our social workers, counselors, psychologists, behavior specialists have been trained have had intense day-long trainings several day trainings on restorative practices. So some schools have invested to layer a restorative practices coordinator who's on site helping to implement and have done more intensive training with their whole faculty. But I would say across the district, we do have professionals who are trained across all of the schools.
Okay, and so
Yeah.
like with those schools that have you said that they're using their innovation funds? Is that what you
Some are the
said?
innovation funds or title funds.
What would be like I guess the decision point, for instance, when the district decides to go with PBIS, like this is maybe where we're gonna put our financial resources or intensity versus saying, okay, well, if this school needs these restorative practices, instead of going that route.
Like I mentioned, the readiness assessment did just that. So there was a matrix of criteria where school, and it's based on, is the leadership team established and ready to implement something that takes on such a heavy lift to do it well and to do it with integrity. So I'm happy to share that readiness assessment criteria to see how we made intentional decisions to set it up for success. And what we certainly hope is that we learn from the schools we're implementing, and there's schools across all the different grade levels, elementary, middle, and high, and we're examining that data now. What are our lessons learned, and how can we then grow and expand the model into our other schools? And you'll see some of that in the recommendations for the charter funding that can be utilized at the district level to do just that. And so I think there is this balance, as with many things, it is grassroots, where the schools say we're interested and the faculty says, yep, we're going to do that. There's value in that, and then there's also value in district support, and it's the both end and finding that right balance that we've been working to strike.
Thanks.
I've got,
Yes, on the
I've
policies?
got one other. And I know it's very intensive. I mean, as Dr. Welch has pointed out, I mean, that's very intensive to do research like this. But when we look at PBIS or look at particularly restorative justice practices that may not have the research behind it, from my understanding from what you had said earlier, that some programs do. And do we have a way of collecting our own research?
Well, I mean, for example, we have added to Infinite Campus, our student information database, a way for schools to capture when they use a restorative circle. So we're capturing just actual how many touches with restorative practices do we have with students, just like we track how many phone calls home, a parent conference, or how many times does a student have another intervention or consequence. So there is tracking like that. This is about culture change. So some of the restorative practices, it's not a one-time training and off you go, and we're gonna see the results immediately. The research that people have done on restorative practices, it takes many years, and that's what Dr. Charles Curtis, who came down, and that was supported by the district to bring a professional from Washington DC. He did work on a professional learning day with our schools and our support teams, and then he did a community meeting at night that I know many of you attended. And that was his message as well, is meaningful change is gonna take time. But we definitely are collecting the data on what the schools that have implemented with higher fidelity this year and had the resources allocated, what gains have they seen, and we'll continue to look at that for sure.
Okay, yeah, I mean, and I know it takes people hours to do that, but to me, it's really important, because
It is.
otherwise, I think the way teachers respond is, is that we adopt a program for 3 or 4 years, and then we go on to something else without knowing if that program, are we leaving it because something new and brand new came on the scene, or are we doing it because it didn't work?
Well, I would certainly encourage us to think of restorative practices not as a program, but a belief
Okay,
and a way of interacting with students and families.
okay.
Thank you. Any other questions on any of these other policies that will be expected to vote and post for public review?
I have a question on any of these.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I had a question about the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act policy. It looks like through the committee that there's just one line, I guess that was struck out, and so that's why it jumped out at me, but I think I just was confused about what it meant exactly. So it says, the school district will require that any accumulated paid leave to which an employee is entitled at the time of application is made for FMLA leave be substituted for all or part of the otherwise unpaid FMLA leave. So that's the first part. So it says, in other words, leave under FMLA and accrued paid leave will run concurrently, not consecutively. And then the part that was struck out was, in the instance of a birth of a child, when a new mother is released from care, the remaining time off will be considered bonding time and therefore leave without pay. So that was part of the policy, but now is not going to be part of the policy. Does that mean that she is then able to take paid leave at that?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, exactly. It basically was preventing people from using their accumulated leave during that time.
It
So we don't
was.
want to do that.
It was.
Yes, it
Right,
was.
but now it's not, okay.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions on JCDA or GBRH?
Well, I have a comment because I was listening to Dr. Dagan. Some years ago, the school district adopted the policy. Well, I don't know whether it was a policy, but anyway, we created a sick leave bank. And what brought that to my attention because people use their time, use it from a days on up, they can go to that sick leave bank. Can anyone tell me that whether we still have that sick leave bank?
We do not, but I have been asked to look into starting that back. There is some legal reasons Mr. Pruitt and I need to discuss about the discriminatory practices of sick leave banks, and we just need to make sure that we can legally administer one, but it is on my to-do list, sir.
There are also some income tax provisions. You have to be very careful with those, or it can end up being taxable income.
For the people that receive it, yeah. So we just want to make sure that we're doing more good than harm.
Moving on, we have one policy that has been out for some time and for which we received some public comment. This is policies to adopt rescind, policy BVFBC, community engagement policy. John, you want any context from the
Sure.
policy committee on this one?
This is a policy that we've worked on a long time. It's part of the B policy revisions that we've been working on since 2017, actually predates Dr. Means' arrival. And so this is one of the last of those that we're looking at. And it's been through multiple edits. This version is a shorter version that the policy committee felt when it went out was an improvement. We have gotten, and you all have, hard copy of 4 different comments so far. from the public. We may receive more before it's all said and done as well. But these are 4 comments. I think that I've read through them. I hope other people have read through them. I think they make some editorial sense. There's a typo in the headings that needs to be changed, or it looks like there is. And there are some other comments as well. So I think that there you have it. The policy committee put out what it thought was an improved version, had gone back to committee and come back out. And now we let the eyes of the public on them, and we see what we think of that as well.
So are you recommending any revision as a result of this input, or?
I'm interested in comments.
Yeah.
As a member of the policy committee, I can see reading a couple of these comments. I think, again, I'm just thinking, like, when you look at Roman numeral A, where it says request to meet with the Board of Education, maybe if we had put in the entire Board of Education, because I think there's some,
Right.
there's confusion sometimes in terms of, I am part of the Board of Education, but I'm not the Board of Education. So I'm kind of looking at these comments in reference to that perspective, because what we tried to do is to speak basically on 2 situations. One is for an individual board member in one situation, and if some organization, which I don't think has ever happened, but if an organization wants to meet with the entire board, then there's a whole nother process. And so I think, just looking at this policy in light of that lens, and perhaps we can make minor changes, of course, as John says, based on other comments if they come in that may be different, maybe even more extensive, but maybe making some minor changes next week. So that's what I'm going to be doing as a member of the policy.
Yes.
So,
Great.
reading through this, I don't quite see where there could be, myself, I don't quite see where there could be confusion where this is addressing individual meetings with constituents. That was one of the comments, but it's actually not the first time that I've heard that feedback. And so I don't know how we might clarify that this doesn't have to do anything with individual, like us talking, like phone calls that we might get from a constituent and.
There is another policy that addresses that, and perhaps we reference that in here to direct people back to that.
Oh, where is that?
That is.
But I think you're right. I mean, there's clearly some, a miscommunication between what we're trying to accomplish and
That's my only worry, so.
we can
yeah.
clarify that. That'd be great.
But yeah, if I could get that policy number for the other one.
Right. We'll find it. Yes.
Well, if my memory is correct around the conversation, when we discussed this, it was more so like a person is invited as a representative, like speaking on behalf of the board versus someone saying, hey, Lakeisha, can you come in, like, what are your thoughts as an individual person? Or maybe even as, this particular district, but I'm not there to speak on behalf of the board. And so I think that was my takeaway from that conversation. And when we are invited to speak on behalf of the board, that is when it would go back to where it says here, any request to meet with the board, or however that ends up changing, will be placed on the next available agenda and will be discussed. I thought that was sort of to address.
Maybe the entire board or a representative of the board, like,
Yeah.
we kind of drive that point home.
Yeah, but it may
See, it only actually addresses the group, and not even the individual. So when you were talking at that, you know, it's like to me, it does spell that there is still some confusion in the language, I think, because that was not our intent when we've been struggling with this for months.
Ms. Worthy?
Yeah, when you're speaking on behalf of this board, according to the law, you must get the approval of this board. And when you go, if someone invites you to a community meeting, et cetera, whatnot, sometimes people say, well, I'm going as an individual. Wherever you go, you're a board member. So you have to follow the law.
So did the law say that the form that Dr. Means and I engaged in with our senators, should I have gotten the approval of the board in advance?
No, I think that was sort of connected, this is my thinking on that, on the government relations committee. And I think you all were speaking to state legislators. And,
Publicly though, in a form.
But with the state, when you look at the state legislators, they are the ones that empower this board and boards across the state. And some people don't understand that.
Yes, Dr. King.
But I don't think that, we have had this conversation before in policy, but I don't think that when we're going places individually, that, the intent of this, and neither is my desire to come to the board and ask permission if I can go to a meeting. Like, that is not gonna happen. But I sort of saw this more so if we are going in the capacity of like a board representative, like representing the board itself.
I mean, that's what I thought of it too, like, when we're on these community committees as a representative of the board. And I know originally this, policy did have some examples, but then I think that made it more confusing, so. I see why they were taken off, but that is what I'm thinking about when I read this.
The only thing I'm saying, folks, when you're invited, you go and speak to a group of people. Be very careful, because as I said, wherever you go, you may say you're speaking as an individual, but you are a board member. The only legality that you're going to have, like we're sitting around this table now, and next Thursday night, you're going to be sitting around the table. If you say something on behalf of the board hadn't given you permission to do it, and you report it in the newspaper, you know, the press may be there, I don't know. And it could be something that can get you in some serious problems. I'm just saying, be aware.
Did you find that?
Yes, it's
policy
in
referring to?
BAB, school board governance. There's a whole section on family community engagement, which just really sanctions and says, of course, as board members, you're going to engage with the community. Of course, you're going to talk to stakeholders. Go forth and do that and be responsive to family and community inquiry and feedback. And so I think both of these ideas would strengthen the policy, Dr. Knox. We can work on some proposed, just clarifying the entire Board of Education and referencing back to there's a clear statement in policy that you should engage with it. Nothing is should prevent or limit engagement.
Are you thinking about cross-referencing these two? We could do that. That would be really good.
In addition, point 11 in BAB also refers to, board members do not attempt to individually speak on behalf of the entire board or commit the board.
That's what I'm talking about.
Which one? I'm sorry.
Point 11, subpoint F in BAB school board governance.
Okay.
We do need to change that second paragraph to A and then B in the second.
Yes, in fact, not in BAB, but rather in B. The one we're currently talking about.
Yeah, we will.
Okay, so,
Well, I just had a question about process, because I don't
Yeah.
know the process from here. So if some changes do need to be made to this for clarification, they can be made now? Okay, and then does it come back for comment before it goes to the?
It doesn't need to. If there's sort of explanatory comments, I think we'd be added to it. And then next week we'll entertain action on whether we go ahead and approve it based on any additions or comments, or whether to table it, whether to send it back to the committee, we'll take some action on it next week.
Thank you for the question, Francis, because that was actually going to be one of my questions, is how much tweaking can we do now that we've gotten public comment back? And so the answer is, Dr. Myers and I can work on it between now and the time that we need to have it up for the regular check.
Great. Cool. Then, moving on through our agenda, we have our usual space there for the board president report. I have nothing for us this week. Go ahead. He was right through there.
Oh, no, you got something.
Nothing. I'm tapped out. We have, moving on to section H. This is the superintendent's report.
I just would like to walk the board through some thoughts that our team have put together as it pertains to some organizations call it human capital, some call it human resources. But just want to talk through what we view as a system, because the main job you have charged me with is to make sure that we have systems in place. And the system around human resources is really critical. It starts with our strategic plan. So our mission statement clearly states that we are an ambitious community of learners and committed to equity and excellence. I won't read the entire mission statement to you, but that is the mission statement that the Board of Education passed last June. Within that strategic plan, there's also a theory of action. And that theory of action is very clear. If the district deliberately works towards eliminating the marginalization of historically underrepresented groups through an organizational emphasis of increasing student achievement for all students. And here's the key, and it's in the bold. Through rigorous standards-based instruction, consistent progress on student growth plans, consistent focus on social-emotional development of our students, and constant attention toward equity practices, then we will accomplish our strategic plan. A theory of action is an if-then statement. If we do these things, then this should happen. There's been a lot of talk since I've arrived around equity. And so I want to talk a little bit about what does equity look like in action. Equity is essential to ensure the needs of every student are met. To help every child reach his or her full potential in this school district, every educator must do three things. One is acknowledge the history behind the systems and structures that drive inequities and how they manifest in education today, and actively work to dismantle them. So, in short, if you're going to work in the southeastern portion of the United States, if you're going to work in a community where we know racial disparities are prevalent, that we know that children of color are living in poverty at a very high rate. If you're going to work in this school district, then you have to be willing to admit that there are certain systems and structures that are driving the current inequities. That doesn't mean that you are guilty of putting those systems in place. That is not what we mean in any way, shape, or form. But you are working in a system that was created to ensure that certain kids were not supposed to succeed. And so we need you to actively work to dismantle those systems. It's not enough to say, well, here's the reason why those systems are currently in place. If you're an educator in this system, you have to actively work to dismantle those systems. If not, if you just sit back and admire the reasons why those systems are currently in place and say, here's the reason why I can't do my work, then in essence, you are perpetuating the problem. The second thing is you have to hold yourself accountable to ensure that students and communities who we serve get the resources and services they need. You will see here from an equity lens, it should be about the students who are in the most level of need. So there are students who, all of our students deserve to get the best. All of our students deserve to get resources and services. But there is a certain component of this work that is critical. There's a group of students who are in the greatest area of need. And that means we need to do double the work for those kids. Again, we can't sit back and admire and say, well, here's the reasons why these kids are in a certain place. if you sign a contract to work in the Clark County School District, then you are accepting to take on this work. And then the final component of work around equity is that you have to commit to equity-focused decision-making. So everything that you do, when you're developing a lesson plan, when you're planning field trips, when you're planning field day, you have to have an equity lens. If you don't, then you're not committed to equity. It can't be, well, this is what we've always done. If you're saying that's what we've always done and you work in a school system where 74% of the children are children of color, and we know that they live in poverty, but you're not taking these three components into play, then you're not committed to equity. So you've seen this slide before. I'll continue to show you this slide as much as I can, because at the core, this is the work that we're asking people to do. A few months ago, when contracts went out, I think they went out March 5th, I wrote a letter to our staff. And I wrote a letter to our staff saying, so if you have a decision to make now, and the decision is to decide if you're going to do this work, and if you're deciding to do this work, then you're coming back. And we're happy to have you back. If you decide that you don't want to do this work, that's okay. But we need someone who's committed to equity and who's going to do this work. It's interesting, a few days ago, I've been able to go to a conference, and someone mentioned to me, and they asked me to remember the company and the history, the arc, the historic arc of Netflix. How many of you received a video or a video game from Netflix in the mail when they first started as a company? How many of you remember that that's what Netflix was? Netflix was a company where they were going to try to take over Blockbuster, if you remember. They were going to say, yeah, you don't have to go to a brick and mortar place. We'll mail you your video game. We'll mail you a video, and then you mail it back to us, and that's how the system works. Netflix has created a human resources infrastructure, a system, where they're asking for people who are committed to their mission, to their work, who are on the cutting edge of that work. It's not appropriate for individuals who work at Netflix to say, well, let's just stay in that space where we're going to mail people videos and video games, and then they'll mail them back to us. Look what Netflix is today. Netflix is that company that we know oh so well today. They went from mailing you videos to streaming movies to now producing their own content. And that's because they have employees who are mission aligned to their organization. So our human capital infrastructure starts with our district strategy, our mission, our vision. That's why the work around our strategic plan is so critical. It drives everything. It should drive everything. I couldn't have written the letter that I wrote on March 5th last year because we didn't have a strategic plan. I was able to write that letter with confidence because now we have a strategic plan saying this is what we do. And it's okay if there are individuals who are unable to do that work or who are not aligned to the work. The next step in this process is then to look at our strategy. How do we want to find individuals who are going to meet our needs from a recruitment, hiring, and development standpoint? Let me stop here and say that I think this is where we have failed in a miserable way as an organization. We have not developed individuals who are hired in our organization well. We haven't done a good job in providing coaching. We haven't done a good job in induction. In essence, for many of our teachers that we hire them. We have a new teacher orientation kickoff in July. And in essence, after that new teacher orientation, it's a good luck. And you hope that you work with a good team of teachers who are going to help you go through the process. We're fixing that, where you have allowed us to hone in and create a position where we have a coordinator of professional learning. From a systems perspective, I felt that was very important for us to have someone who was responsible for the professional learning of our entire organization and making sure that people are learning this work. And then finally, if you have a good organizational strategy, then you can look at performance measurement. We've talked about our data in the past. We understand where our data is currently sitting from a position standpoint. None of us are pleased or happy or satisfied with where we are currently. We believe that this work will get us in a different place. This is the framework. And so this is the promise that we want to make sure that every child can have, regardless of the zip code that they live in or the school that they attend or what titles their parents have before or after their names. Every child should receive this type of instruction from our schools. Candidly, that's not happening everywhere. And that's why we believe that we continue to have a robust professional learning program and we hire with our mission and our vision and our theory of action in mind, we can turn our current performance around. So we think there's a three-pronged approach that we need to take in the recruiting and hiring process. The first is to reduce the need for new teachers. And I'll give you some data on where we are currently with our retention numbers in a second. The second is to win the competition for top talent. Let me give you just a little nuance to that statement. We want to win the competition for top talent for individuals who know how to work in an urban education environment. So we can hire top talent, but that talent may not match working in some of our schools. Last night, Mr. Davis had, and I appreciate Mr. Davis being at my second listening session around student behavior and how can we address student behavior. I gave a story about a young man named Freddie. When I was an assistant principal, we're naming him Freddie to protect the innocent. But Freddie was a high school student who had a tough day, was sent out of class. I was radioed to come pick Freddie up, and by the time I got to the hallway, Freddie was already knocking things off the walls and knocking doors down and using profanity. If you can imagine the situation, that's where we were with Freddie. I was a young assistant principal, and I assumed by virtue of the school district giving me a walkie-talkie and a name tag that Freddie was going to stop when I said, "Freddie, stop." It didn't work. Freddie continued to escalate. I didn't use restorative justice practices. I continued to follow Freddie, which escalated him even more. At that point, my principal and the associate superintendent at the time looked at me and said, "You are a new assistant principal, figure it out, get Freddie under control. We can't have him disrupt the learning environment." So I continued to follow Freddie. Freddie became more angry, and it escalated to a point where he did something that resulted in him having to be up for a hearing for an expulsion hearing. In retrospect, I did something wrong to Freddie. Freddie didn't do anything wrong. I was wrong, not Freddie. We need educators who are going to work in this district and understand that they may have a Freddie moment if they work in the Clark County School District. The likelihood that they're going to have a Freddie moment is higher than them never having that moment. And you have to be able to meet that experience, utilize the training that we provide, and try to de-escalate the situation instead of escalating. I think sometimes we're not very explicit in telling our staff and potential employees that this is what you're facing when you hire and when you consider a job here in Clark County. And then finally, we want to make targeted small investments. So let's talk about some national data. From a national data standpoint, 1 in 6 teachers leave their current job each year. That's national. Doesn't matter if you're in the Southeast, if you're in California, if you're in the North, teachers are leaving the profession. And they're going to do other jobs. The other component is from an HR standpoint, we're always taught to make sure that we think about generational issues in our nation. And the reality is that the baby boomers are retiring at a rapid pace. And so that pool of employees are leaving us. The Generation Xers are inching closer and closer to retirement age. They're no longer young. They're hitting 50 years old in some cases. Not to point any individuals out, no, Dr. Thomas, but they're reaching that point. And we're finding that millennials are not entering the profession at the same rate as baby boomers and Gen Xers. We also find that 44%, almost half of all teachers quit the profession within the first 5 years of being in the job. So let's talk about CCSD. Currently, right now, as of this week, 123 teachers from our current staff of our 1,103 teachers have decided not to return. It's about 11%. We're trending 1 percentage point below our disappointing retention rate of last year, which was over 12%. Of the 123 teachers who are not returning, 60 of them are within their first 2 years of being in the profession, and 24 are retiring. Mr. Davis, that little box at the bottom of the slide is for you, because I appreciate you keeping me honest. We currently have 87 vacancies in the organization, which we are hoping to have all of them hired by the first day of school. I'll make sure that everyone gets this slideshow. So when you look at our 3 levers of reduce the need for new teachers, again, I can't emphasize enough your support of our vision of having a coordinator of professional learning is really important. Your support of our vision of having an instructional coach in each school was very important. Your support of us continuing to have more behavior specialists in the organization is very important. We believe that those are things that will help people stay with us if they understand the mission alignment. We also understand, I'm going to jump down to the second one, we understand that we have to improve the hiring process and make the job more attractive. And so a couple of things that we're starting to look at is the task. There should be some level of task associated with becoming a teacher in the school system. The traditional way of hiring a teacher is a group of teachers get together, they come up with a group of questions that are typically not behavior-based questions. Those of you who are from the corporate world, you know you want to ask questions of, have you done this before? It's typically more philosophical questions of, what is your philosophy on discipline? And so if someone can answer those textbook questions well, you can be hired. The other component of it is we have a lot of interview teams that look very similar to the teaching staff that someone is trying to join versus looking like the community of the students that they're serving. So we want to look at different tasks of teaching a model lesson, teaching a real lesson from our curricular portal, writing a lesson on the spot using an equity lens, analyzing student behavior, which is a task that we're asking people to do more and more of as classroom teachers, or watch a video of a challenging situation and ask what they would do. So have them watch a video. Maybe we'll have some of our students from our theater programs act out and someone becomes Freddie. So how do you handle Freddie in the classroom after watching the video? We also understand that there are other indicators. We need to see individuals who have proven that they can grow students from their previous experience or they've taught in this type of environment. We also understand that we have to, and you have been very helpful as a board in allowing us to become more candidate first. You've allowed Ms. Duke and her team to offer contracts as soon as possible. I think we're still behind. When Ms. Duke and her team goes out to job fairs, there are school districts, urban school districts in particular, who are arming their HR teams with offering contracts on the spot at the job fairs. So they may like Lynn Duke's a very engaging person who wouldn't want to work here after meeting Lynn. But what happens typically is she'll have a good conversation with someone, they go to the next booth, and they will say, you're a good candidate, you meet all of our criteria, here's a contract. Oh, and by the way, here's a bonus check as well. It's become that competitive in hiring for teachers. So those are just some of the things that we're starting to look at. Instead of becoming district first, we want to become candidate first. Instead of having interviews in regards to what do we want to know, we want to start asking, are you aligned with our mission? And answering questions on the front end. So just from a systems perspective, we're trying to change. We also need to make our jobs more attractive by guaranteeing coaching. A lot of teachers who leave the profession have told us over a lot of different survey tools that having more face time with their principal is really critical. I like to use the terminology that building principals live in their schools with their staff. But principals are busy. And so that ability to look at the teacher every day and have time once a week just to sit down and say, how are things going? Even 15 to 20 minutes, you would think that that would be easy as not. And so making sure that there's guaranteed face time with principals is really important. Creating a support group for new teachers is really critical. The behavior specialist, I can't emphasize enough, is really key if you're going to work in a district like ours. I like the idea, but it's going to require money at some point. But I like the idea of a residency where if you have a promising teacher who may not be ready to handle a classroom full of Freddies right away, at least giving them a half contract or a half assignment where they're teaching, and then the other half of their assignment is they're in a classroom with a veteran teacher and they're watching the process. Just like we do in the medical profession where there's some level of a residency where you're learning the job over time. What we do is we throw that 22-year-old teacher into a classroom full of Freddies. Not to say Freddie's naughty, he just needs a different level of service. We may not prepare those younger teachers well right away. If we can give them more time, that would be helpful. But that's a cost that we have to consider. Other school districts are doing things such as on-site daycares and making their job appealing to their employees by saying, here's a perk that we can offer you if you work in our school system. So I want to ask you to, and everyone in the room can, I want to ask you to find a thought partner and consider what non-compensation-based, compensation-based elements can we leverage to win the competition for top talent. In other words, what are some things that you think we could use to draw top talent to the Clark County School District? I'll give you about 4 minutes to talk with your thought partner.
Okay.
Yes.
How are you? One thing about it, they give them that can help. Especially with new teachers. Even some veterans. Trying to I don't know. I'll say this right now. I probably should talk to this That's a key factor. Okay? So what I do and what I do is
More seconds if you don't mind. If you don't mind, we'll come back together. Every time we have this activity, we learn new things. So are there some suggestions or ideas you would like to share with us as a board that you think we should consider from a non-compensation perspective? Yes, sir.
What, I'm the generation of like, back in the day when Vista was starting up and when there was, you know, there was a call for, do you want to be do you want to be challenged? Do you want to do more than simply go into a profession right off the bat? Do you want to make a difference in people's lives? So I just don't, I mean, I know we don't have a big publicity budget, but you know, being able to like go out throughout the country and to kind of raise that challenge, or throughout the Southeast, and to raise that challenge. We could use GAE, I mean National Association of Teachers, we could use, different organizations put in their magazine, don't you want a challenge? And kind of build it as, you know, it's that type of thing.
Our tagline of Better Every Day is catching people. Our continued conversations around equity is catching the attention of prospective candidates. People, our board, full disclosure, our board meetings are all online, and so prospective candidates do watch our board meetings. And they are observing, they observe, this is a reflection of the community. And so if we continue to talk about these issues in a way where it doesn't go away, there's some organizations where they mention it once a year and then it goes away. And we've had candidates come in and share with us during the interview process that was an appealing component of the work, that we're not shying away from things that most other school districts have tried to sweep under the rug. So yes, I think our logic behind our Better Every Day messaging is all part of, we can always get better. We're committed to continuous improvement, and we're committed to making sure that every child receives what he or she
And at
needs.
the same time, advertise the supports that
Absolutely.
that work.
And we have to do it, as I said earlier, I think that's an area that we collectively as a leadership team have acknowledged we could do. We need to continuously do a better job in that space. Anyone else?
Yes.
Yes.
And I didn't want to say this because being a retired principal, but I want to say it.
Where were you a retired principal, Mr. Warren?
I tried to encourage Lakeisha to do it, but she didn't. She said no. But anyway, I'm going to start off with your example. New teachers, and even veteran teachers that are coming from elsewhere, do not give them a classroom full of Freddies. It happens. You have to build a support system for them. Now, teachers that have been in the building for years, okay, but they've never taught a lower level class, okay? And you need to break it up and spread it around. Now, the next thing, because I don't see this happening in Clark County because we have the state-of-the-art schools. Don't give them the worst classroom.
From a facility standpoint.
Absolutely, but it has happened. And you have to build that support system for them. And you probably, all of us probably have heard this. Have a strong buddy system. When I was principal, the strongest buddy system that I had at Cedar Shores High School,
That's the high school.
the department. It's a special ed department.
And so, Mr. Worthy, what we want to do, and you've noticed it earlier in the slides here, we want to go beyond the mentor-buddy model to a coaching model, where, and we will continue to have a buddy or mentor where you need that, where someone can show you where's the faculty lounge, where's the, just basic things to survive in a school. But we also need to provide coaching where someone can go to a colleague and say, I'm having trouble with this space. How would you work through it? Or better yet, have a professional ask questions. And so the vision is to eventually start training mentor or veteran teachers on how to coach. Because many of you have gone through that process of learning coach language and asking certain questions instead of jumping and giving answers. So you're absolutely right. We want to always have that first level of the buddy system or mentors, but we want to go even deeper with coaching.
I'll mention one other thing.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to get too personal, but all of the new teachers I hired every year, I used to bring them in before pre-planning, take them to whatever restaurant was. They normally would use Chinese food for
Oh.
some reason. But anyway, feed them a nice lunch, and we have little conversations there. We go back to the school, and what made me thought of this is what you said a few minutes ago, where the teacher's lounge, where the sign-in was. This is a workboard. We work, just really walk through everything that teacher would need to do in that school. And it really helped too, you know. But, you know, there's some people, and I would say to new teachers that, look, even if they were a veteran teacher, you see the shows now, okay, when you start teaching, when those kids come in here, the second week in August, you know, that's where the rubber meets the highway, okay? You from August to December, please let me know if you're dissatisfied, you don't want to stay at see the shows, but also let me know some of the reasons why you're leaving. Then I would write those down and try to improve on those every year.
And kind of piggybacking on that same comment, you can perhaps even, if there's bandwidth within, you know, Ms. Duke's, all the work that she does, if there's bandwidth to explore with people who have stayed, what made it possible for them to stay, right? And really trying to understand within those first, especially in those first couple of years, that lived experience of the people who were able to make it through those early years, so we can build on what works as well.
We're currently in the process of collecting exit interview data. But we're also doing stay interviews as well and asking people, so why did you decide to stay? And are you truly mission aligned? And asking those levels of questions as well. So I just want to point out, when you look at the funnel of the work of human resources, it starts with us attracting mission aligned people and making sure, did I miss anything?
Well, I didn't know if we were gonna hear from other people.
I'm sorry, did anyone else have anything to share?
Partners?
Even out, yeah.
We liked
I'm sorry.
the daycare reimbursements.
You like the daycare?
So the one example that you gave was an on-site daycare, but we talked over here that probably wouldn't make sense to have an on-site daycare at every
Right.
school. But if there was some kind of reimbursement, childcare reimbursement, it would be nice.
So some type of district-wide daycare
Or not even a district-wide daycare, but one
that could serve district employees.
reimbursement for the
Okay.
childcare, so they can go where they wanted, but got some sort of.
In terms of their morale, and we're going along with the better every day, but building spotlights and allowing teachers to demonstrate what they can do. Because we're talking about mission aligned, but teachers come with a lot of, teachers who are staying, they have a lot of creative and innovative ways that they're teaching, and a lot of times not an avenue to demonstrate that. So I think also show, that we value them and what they can bring to the table as well. So I think that having more opportunities for us to spotlight what is working.
So that was one of the main reasons why this year we went to the Better Everyday Award, of highlighting individuals who are doing that work, to show that there are people who are doing some amazing work, and let's recognize them. Yes.
I was gonna say, to add to that, like providing teachers and even principals, like the opportunity to get outside of their buildings and their classrooms and be able to go and see what other people their colleagues are doing, and maybe even sharing, because there's really not a lot of time for that with their courses, the number of courses they're teaching. It's very hard to get outside of the classroom. And so then with that, it's very easy to begin to think that that my classroom is functioning like every other classroom, and that these problems are problems that everybody's having. Or I just think we have a missed opportunity for teachers to really be the experts, and be able to share some of what they're doing, and giving them the space to be able to actually go and seek out those opportunities to learn from their colleagues versus like someone coming into their room and saying, okay, you're not doing this, that, and that. Like the evaluative component is there and critical, but then also being able to learn from each other. And then another thing I thought of was, as far as leveraging what we already have, I think leadership is critical. Because when I think of professional development, I know a lot of times we think of teachers being that sort of the larger number. But I think leaders, be it like school-based leaders, but also district leaders, there's a way in which we all impact the outcomes of our students. And so sometimes we may expect teachers to continue to develop and also want to create the space for them to do that, but we're not creating the same space, or it's not the same urgency for principals or for district personnel. And so then it's sort of thrown off because you have like one segment or a group of stakeholders that are constantly like trying to improve, but then you have others who really don't, quite frankly, see it as, you know, their jobs for continuous improvement.
I would agree. I think we're excited about our induction program that will be more than just a new teacher orientation model this coming year, because we'll be able to tap veteran teachers and master teachers to work with our new teachers. So we're excited about that component of the work. The principals at Gaines, Alps, Whitehead, and J.J. Harris have partnered together this year to go to each other's schools, and they walk through each other's schools to observe teaching. This is the first year we train them in terms of what to look for, and they are partnering and learning from one another. It's really been very powerful, and the principals have shared with me, my colleagues are able to share things with me that I've never seen. I walk in this building every day. I see these staff members every day, and through the lens of one of my colleagues, through a walkthrough, I learned something. So we are actually supporting and promoting that type of collaborative work. We have to find, and I think it's going to be one of your items that you hopefully move towards consent tonight. We need to have a better substitute teacher pool to allow that type of work to cascade to our classroom teachers. So then they can be pulled out for a day, and they can go and observe each other in the classroom as well. But that's our vision.
In terms of teachers who aspire to be principals, I'm not sure how that process works, but making it, some people I know want to be principal, but it seems as though it's decided by the principal, so that could be subjective. So looking at that process of how teachers can get prepared to be become assistant principals and principals, I think will also motivate a lot of teachers to want to stay in the district rather than go somewhere else.
I think it was February, Ms. Duke and Dr. Myers and I had a chance to talk with our teacher advisory board, and the feedback was, yes, we need to make that process more clear, but the stronger feedback we received from that teacher leader group was, we don't want to be principals. We don't want to be administrators, but are there ways that you can create a career pathway where we can be a coach? Can we teach part-time and then coach part-time? Can we coach full-time? We still like instruction, but we don't want to have to become administrators. And in a K-12 model, that's the only pathway for promotion. And so we've been talking since that really insightful feedback from the teacher advisory board of saying, so how can we create other opportunities for master teachers to stay in our district and have opportunities to lead in different ways, other than being an administrator?
Yeah, Dr. Means. Bingo, Dr. Maddox. You looking at a product of what I went through. They had a leadership intern program in Clark County School District years ago. And started out with about 30 of us. Principals turned those names in to the human resource person and superintendent. Anyway, we narrowed it down to 10. I was fortunate enough to be one of the 10. And what we did, that leadership intern program, by me working in a high school, I had to go and partners up. Ray Clark was my partner. We visited 2 elementary schools half day. Apps Road, and I believe Burnett Shows. Now, we also spent time visiting every segment of this school district. And that was from the superintendent's office to the transportation. Many people called it the bus barn at that particular time. Then we were registered into our first administrative course at University of Georgia. It was a tremendous help to me. And I believe out of those 10, 8 of us later on tapped to be administrators in Clark County. 2 of them were not, but they went elsewhere. I know 1 went to Barrow County. But that was a powerful program.
The research shows not only, and it's more of a private sector review of the data, but the research shows that if you promote people from within, they stay longer in your organization, regardless of what level of the job. That if you can create those types of pathways and programs, you create a level of buy-in and loyalty to the organization. Yes.
I was just going to say, based on teachers I've talked to, a lot of it, I think, not all of it obviously, but some of it at least can be boiled down to having the autonomy to use their talents. They're highly educated and they want to be able to teach based on their training. They have respect from the district, that they feel that they're respected for their talents, and that they have, I think, stability in their schools. Hopefully a good stability, but a stability. And so that's how I read the non-compensation based elements, because none of those really are compensation, but they are elements that I think teachers are probably looking for.
Thank you.
So I have only one comment, and that is, again, the listening. I think it's so important that we create that culture of listening to these teachers as they journey down this pathway, especially in that first year and that next year, that they have a vehicle for getting communication back to you in terms of what's happening and what their experience is, or to their principal or whoever, but they need to be encouraged to talk about those experiences so we can learn from those, and they can share that with others. That would be amazing. The other thing, the one I did have, that was one. The second one is this, about these substitutes. It bothers me that, I think our model has been in the past that when the teacher's not there, we put somebody else in the classroom. I'd like for us to look at what else can we do with that class if we don't have a teacher there. Is there some other creative way that we can enhance their learning experience and not rely on someone coming in trying to carry on that lesson? Is there an alternative that we can do to further engage them or better utilize that time?
I know my time is limited, so I just want to talk about the funnel. We always want to attract people who are mission aligned. We then recruit those people. We screen, we interview, we hire, we support, and then it's our hope, if we go through this process appropriately, that we retain people. This graphic is really important because it's a continuous support, that if we have a strategic plan, if the strategic plan drives development of our HR system, then our HR systems directly impact employee skills, motivation, and the structure and the design of their work, of our instruction. And then that should result in employee behavior translating into organizational performance. That's the causal effect that we're looking for. So I'll go back to the promise. Why this work? 3 reasons. The data, and you have some data in front of you, but the performance data, I believe, demands that we try something different, that we teach differently, that the current path of what we have been doing, while good in certain pockets, has not been good in the aggregate. We have to do something different, drastically different. There's a need for expanded professional capacity, and that we need to have high expectations for all children. And when you look at the data, and I've shared this with the board and the public before, we should be disappointed with the number of our students who are identified as gifted and their performance on milestones. They're not all performing at the potential that they should perform at. We're not reaching our full potential as an organization. And so I'll conclude by saying one of Richard Welch's mentors. You'll hear from Dr. Welch in a second, but one of his mentors is Dr. Richard Milner, who will be at our Parent Advisory Board meeting on May 13th, and who has worked with 3 of our schools. I'm really excited to share with you the work that they're going to do from a transformational standpoint. The 3 schools is Timothy, Chase, and Barrow. But Dr. Milner talks about the fact that at the core of dealing with home issues and just the structure of schools, at the core, at the intersection is teaching. Teaching can make the difference. That yes, kids may come from home situations that are not ideal. And they may, and you're gonna hear some disappointing data in terms of policies and procedures that are exacerbating the disproportionality data in our schools from a disciplinary standpoint. And those structures hurt kids from a school structure standpoint. But the one thing that can really even this out through their practices is a great teacher. And that's why our system around HR is really critical. That's why we're holding everyone to a higher standard. And that's not blaming anyone. It's just understanding that if we want to reach our strategic plan goals, this is the work we have to do. So we're going to continue to try to get better every day. I appreciate your participation, and you may have more questions.
Yeah, let's have like really brief questions, so I know we've got some other things to move on to. Go ahead.
I just have a request.
Yes.
So we are just starting, obviously, our recruitment and hiring season.
Yeah.
So in the fall, when that's over, could we just revisit this presentation? You could let us know what recruitment techniques were used, which you found most successful. And also, it would be wonderful to know, which of these initiatives that you've covered tonight are implemented in the fall.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Great.
I just have one. Dr. Means, you talked about with the letter that went out with the contract, and I haven't seen the letter, and so what I'm hoping that was in there as well is that not only are we challenging people to do what needs to be done as you described, but also the fact that we are putting additional supports in place to build that capacity within our teachers. And so
I don't think I had that part in there.
Okay, because I'm just thinking of the teacher that's been in there 2 or 3 years, and it's kind of like, maybe I'm not up to the task. Maybe I can't rise to where the district wants me to be, and thinking that it's something that they didn't have, and it's because they are lacking somehow in their training or intuitive abilities, and not knowing that if they can be committed to the work, we will give them the resources they need. It may take us a while to do it, but our intent is to give our teachers every bit of professional help and induction and all these things that we described, that is humanly possible.
We're continuing, as we build these systems, we're continuing to express them and share them with our teaching staff.
Great, thank you. Good? Okay. Thank you for that report, Dr. Means. Moving on, we have a student discipline and disproportionality report.
I'm just gonna tee it up because
Okay.
you don't wanna hear from me, you wanna hear from other folks. You're gonna hear 2 reports tonight. One is around student discipline and consequences in general, and one's about disproportionality with student discipline as it relates to race and special education. And Ms. Hill's gonna deliver that shorter report. First, Dr. Richard Welch is going to present to you, and I can honestly say, board members, in my 20 years of service to the Clark County School District, there have been few projects and initiatives that have excited me more than my work with Dr. Welch. And as a thought partner, as a researcher, the way he's challenged me and my team to think about what we're doing around student discipline has been amazing. For the benefit of new board members, to let you know, Dr. Welch is part of our professional development school district, and back in August, this board approved a proposal to intersect with the University of Georgia in this way, and we currently have 7 professors in residence serving in our schools. Some are more practice-based and are in schools like Clark Middle, the Career Academy, Fowler Drive, Oglethorpe Avenue, and several are research-based professors in residence, and Dr. Welsh is one of those. When he and I started talking about 18 months ago and dreaming about what we could do with a research project, I couldn't believe he was agreeing to work with us, because in the research that I had read that he'd done, he works with school districts that have hundreds of thousands of students, and he works with national data sets. And so when he said he was interested in us, I thought, how fortunate for us. So without further ado, his report is linked on board docs, and everyone can have access to that. I know board members have it. I finally just want to thank Richard for not only his work that he's done as a PIR, but his investment in our community. If anyone's been paying attention, Dr. Welsh has been at every work session and every board meeting since he became a partner with us. He attends community meetings. He's always scribing notes. He's listening. He's learning. And I just so appreciate him for all the work he's done. He has a wife and a little one at home, and he's invested so much time. So without further ado, Dr. Welch, please share your research with us. I appreciate you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I prepared remarks for tonight, so you know professors are prone to ramble. If you allow me to speak freely on student discipline, we might be here until next week's board meeting. Thank you very much for that introduction, Dawn. My name is Richard Welsh. I am an assistant professor of educational administration and policy at UGA. For the past year or so, I've had the pleasure to serve as a district-wide professor in residence for educational policy and equity here in Clark County School District, and since then I have been working on a mixed methods research study that examines disparities and interventions in student discipline. The study uses 4 years of student-level quantitative data to analyze the trends and disproportionalities in disciplinary infractions and consequences. I complement the quantitative data analysis with qualitative data from semi-structured interviews with school leaders and district leaders, as well as school and district level documents. The study is ongoing, so just to be clear, very preliminary findings to help us with our conversation, and the ultimate goal is really to get a granular understanding of how the interactions between teachers and school leaders may influence disciplinary outcomes. And then to use this understanding to inform alternative approaches to exclusionary discipline. So today I'm honored to share some of the preliminary findings. The report provides further details. Thus my aim today is really to provide a clear and concise summary of a very complex phenomenon. Before I proceed, please allow me to express my gratitude to the district and school leaders, as well as the educators in Clark County that have taken the time to share their thoughts with me. In particular, Dr. Means, Dr. Myers, Dr. Thomas, Mr. Barrelman, Ms. Suggs. Thank you all very much. All mistakes are mine. All right, so in the past 4 years, disciplinary incidents have increased. The increase in disciplinary infractions is driven by middle schools, or largely driven by middle schools, I should say. Between 2015 and 2018, infractions in elementary schools increased by 792 incidents, or 52%. Infractions in high schools increased by 789 incidents, or 28%. Whereas infractions in middle schools increased by 2,701 incidents, or 109%. Similar to the state of Georgia, roughly 15% of students in Clark County receive one or more disciplinary infractions each year. For ease of interpretation, I have classified individual infractions into 5 categories. District-wide, subjective offenses, which include student incivility as well as disorderly conduct, accounts for the majority of disciplinary infractions, so roughly 40%. And as you can see here, there are interesting and notable variations across schooling levels. Staff and student assault as well as property-related offenses, so these include fighting, physical aggression, threat, and intimidation, account for roughly a third of our infractions. And then attendance-related infractions account for roughly 15%. So the bulk of the infractions really fall into three categories. As I mentioned, the table shows noteworthy variation across student levels. Perhaps the biggest one that comes to mind is that attendance-related infractions are really a concern at the high school level. Similar to districts nationwide, suspensions are the most frequent pathway through which student discipline results in school exclusion in Clark County. Although most disciplinary infractions are resolved using suspensions, the encouraging news is that, similar to the state of Georgia, since 2017, Clark County has preferred in-school suspension, ISS, to out-of-school suspension, OSS. ISS is considered a lesser form of exclusion with potential for academic and behavioral remediation. School leaders often argue that their toolkit to address student behavior is limited, and the reliance on suspensions supports this notion. OSS is used more frequently in elementary schools than middle and high schools, and ISS is used more in high schools than in middle schools. The top 3 disciplinary infractions resulting in an out-of-school suspension were fighting, student incivility, and physical aggression. OSS was most frequently used for student incivility in elementary schools and for fighting in middle and high schools. When we look at ISS, roughly half of all ISS are due to attendance-related offenses or student incivility. High schools and middle schools use ISS differently. So in middle schools, most in-school suspensions is for student incivility, whereas in high schools, most ISS is for attendance-related infractions. It is important to situate Clark County within the larger state and national context. In many ways, Clark County is a microcosm of the state and national trends and challenges in student discipline. Similar to the state of Georgia and districts nationwide, African American students, male students, homeless students, and students with disabilities disproportionately receive suspensions relative to their enrollment. On the other hand, Hispanic, Asian, white, migrant, gifted, and English language learners receive less suspensions relative to their enrollment. The disproportionalities are similar across the types of infractions and schooling levels, with a few exceptions. The most notable one that comes to mind is that in elementary schools, male students account for an alarming 80% of disciplined students, which is noticeably higher than the proportion in middle and high schools, which is around 60%. Various socially constructed categories such as race and class interact to contribute to students' educational experiences. Black students especially are socially positioned by a wide range of other characteristics such as culture, gender, disability that intersect and influence their interaction with exclusionary discipline. So intersectionalities is this concept of really trying to look at these intersections of socially constructed categories. When we do that, the disproportionalities really come to forth. So, for instance, 25% of the district's enrollment is African male students, but 52% of the disciplined population is African male students. Similarly, African male students with disabilities account for roughly 6% of the district's enrollment, but 18% of students being disciplined. So disproportionalities, it really brings to forth the importance of what's happening in student discipline and how this intersects across student characteristics. One of the key concerns with exclusionary discipline is that it takes students outside the classroom and reduces instructional time. The association between student discipline and student achievement in Clark County is apparent. only 6% of the students in the discipline population were proficient in math, compared to a district average of around 32%. Nationwide, in 2015-16, students lost roughly 11 million days due to suspensions. Georgia is the 10th highest in the nation, with around 650,000 days lost to suspensions. African American students lose more days relative to their white counterparts. The preliminary analysis reveals that students in Clark County are losing thousands of days each year to suspensions. I can't recall Dr. Means' exact numbers, but we only have 2,000 or so days with our students.
2,288.
Thank you, sir. We're losing a bunch of these days to suspensions. African American students, male students, and students with disabilities account for the bulk of days lost to suspensions. Oftentimes, the conversation on student discipline is polarizing and gets framed in binary terms. Either you're for a punitive approach or restorative approach. Either students should be suspended all the time or not suspended at all. Either you're for law and order and 3 strikes, or against all school exclusion at the expense of a safe and productive learning environment. There is a bit more nuance when we consider the student discipline literature and preliminary results from Clark County. From a robust student discipline literature, we know that student behavior, student characteristics, and school level variables all contribute to disciplinary outcomes. The most recent evidence suggests that school level variables are the strongest predictors of disciplinary outcomes. In other words, school and classroom occurrences that result from the policies, practices, and perspectives of teachers and principals appear to play an important role in explaining discipline disparities. Simply put, a wealth of empirical evidence tells us that students are receiving different consequences for the same behavior. The higher rates of exclusionary discipline experienced by Black students are not the result of higher rates of misbehavior or these students engaging in a greater variety of infraction or more severe infractions. We must also be wary of deficit-oriented perspectives when we discuss student discipline. Oftentimes, we blame factors such as family dynamics, poverty, and socioeconomic status, when the research tells us that these factors do play a role, but they are not the driving force behind discipline disparities. Thus, the operative challenge in student discipline is how we handle certain offenses in ways that simultaneously reduce school exclusion as well as disruptions to the learning environment. As we work towards a better understanding of the contributors of the disparities in discipline, we've also begun work on constructing an evidence-based strategic framework to guide the direction of discipline interventions. I've classified the interventions into 3 categories: policies, programs, and personnel, the 3 Ps. Each strategic direction targets various and varying mechanisms, from teacher-student interactions, school climate, student behavior. Each category has short and long-term options. So for instance, support personnel may be employed in the short term, and perhaps changing teacher recruitment to gain more minority teachers, it may be a longer-term strategic goal. The most popular policy change is to revise the code of conduct to decrease the use of this exclusionary discipline. So we've seen districts such as Philadelphia and LAUSD ban the use of suspensions for willful defiance or non-severe infractions, especially in elementary grades. Positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBIS, and restorative justice are popular school-level based programs. It's important to note that these programs are not mutually exclusive and can be used together. We've spoken a lot about social emotional learning, SEL, and it's often thought to be either a prevention or an antidote of sort to student discipline. And of course, programs that bolster professional learning and grow the professional capacity of adults in schools is also necessary. One of the emerging approaches is to reduce exclusionary discipline is to put more adults in schools. So we increase the number of support personnel, as what we've been mentioning, such as your behavior interventionists, your behavior specialists. It is plausible that additional school personnel may waste resources and do more harm than good if they are not qualified or deployed in a coordinated manner. I will repeat that. It is plausible that additional school personnel may waste resources and do more harm than good if they are not qualified or deployed in a coordinated manner. Social workers and counselors should know how their jobs differ and pathways to synergy to improve student outcome. Thus, it is a step in the right direction for us to expand our ecosystem of support personnel. But as we do that, we need to be especially attuned to ensuring that the roles of these support personnel are clear and coordinated. Resource allocation is just as important as more resources to reducing discipline disparities. Policy is important, but not sufficient to reduce discipline disparities. Oftentimes, educational stakeholders are concerned that the code of conduct do not clearly outline expectations. But we must recognize that policy by itself does not assure consistency. While I acknowledge the need to signal expectations, where the proverbial rubber meets the road is when the expectations in the code of conduct collide with students' lived experiences and the preparation in classroom management, cultural proficiency, and ability to develop relationships of their teachers. As the son of a teacher, I know how committed and hardworking teachers are. Yet, teachers' role in discipline disparities is a confluence of factors. Teachers' classroom management skills, teacher-student racial match, the lack of a representative bureaucracy, teachers' perceptions, expectations, and bias all contribute to disciplinary outcomes. Additionally, some of the emerging evidence that has emanated from the interviews suggests that in Clark County, teacher preparation as well as teachers' knowledge and understanding of the context of Clark County are also pertinent factors. We cannot give teachers baskets to carry water. We must equip them with the tools, skills, and strategies necessary to educate a diverse student population. The gist that I receive from the research thus far is that as well-meaning as our teachers are, when those doors close, they are not prepared to handle the diverse student population and the challenges that come with being a teacher. We need to help our teachers. In order to do so, professional learning have to be authentic, strategy-rich, modeling-filled, and attuned to the local context here in Clark County. There is a need to provide techniques outside of school exclusion for school leaders and teachers to handle student discipline. So overall, the approach here places more focus on adult behavior in schools, target relationships within schools as well as relationships between schools and communities, and stresses improve teacher classroom management and de-escalation skills. It is unlikely that interventions that target one element is going to work, and several scholars have argued that we need to target many mechanisms at the same time. Deep-seated beliefs and attitudes, interactions, curriculum rigor, and cultural applicability. I will close with this. There is much room for a greater understanding of the disparities and harms as policymakers, educators, and stakeholders work towards solving what I call the discipline dilemma. This calls for close collaboration between researchers and practitioners to ensure that policy informs research and vice versa. I'm very proud of the partnership that we've developed here in Clark County, and I believe we're at the start of being able to inform alternative approaches using rigorous analysis. At the same time, my overarching message is that we need innovation. We need innovation in student discipline. We need policies, programs, and systems that bridge the trust gap and lived experiences between teachers and students. We need to humanize students rather than criminalize youthful exuberance and childish behavior. We need to foster stronger school community ties. And we can do this in proactive ways that reimagine the learning environments for all. Thank you for your time, and I'll open it up for questions if I have any time left. Thank you.
Thank you, it's fantastic. Questions? Mr. Davis.
I've got two. One is, I noticed that in your research you found differences within schools in terms, and wanting to know what your insights are, because those differences are not necessarily what one would expect in terms of what schools have lower numbers versus other schools. And so I'd be interested to see your perspective on that. The other thing is what have you noticed about how ISS is actually structured in terms of, and I'm sure you visited these places, and are they there to educate? Or are they simply a holding tank?
All right. So yes, I acknowledge there's quite some variation among schools as well as variation among grades. I've started to look at it, and it's going to be the focus of an upcoming report where I'll dig more into it. From what we're seeing, we suspect there are several factors that might be at work. Demographic composition, we are also looking at school leader turnover, the composition of school leaders. So the variation across schools is the next big thing we'll get to. In terms of ISS structure, as I mentioned here, the thought to make ISS meaningful emerged from these visits. I would call ISS a work in progress. There's variation across schools. What we don't want it to be is a holding room. What we do want it to be is something more meaningful, something that we can try and leverage and capitalize on the potential for academic and behavioral remediation in those settings. So I do think we're doing work towards it. Far from perfect, but we're getting there.
Yeah, a couple of questions. You mentioned in one of your slides in the report that I think at least over 40% of the infractions that lead to out-of-school suspension happens in elementary school. Am I interpreting that right?
No, I'd say 40% of the infractions in elementary schools are solved with OSS.
With OSS. What if you found some of those subjective, offenses and to be, I see here staff, student assault, and property. So I'm just wondering if you've had an opportunity yet to look below the numbers, but actually looking at what's written, inside of to get an idea of what are 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds.
I hope to have a research team to look at each comment. So I really start with how it's reported, and that's something that we can pursue in the future. So I don't look at what is written up. I start with the infractions, right? But that's something that we spoke about, but it would be such an intensive lift that we've kind of put it in the future to do. So we kind of start with the data as we put it.
And with you mentioned we wanted to look closer at school variables when you are exploring some of the school differences. I just wanted to know your thoughts about the type of leadership of the principal. If it tends to be more authoritative or authoritarian, or, and I'm just using terms that may not, I mean, maybe different terms as far as like education is concerned, but maybe how that shows up and what's the relationship between that and the discipline disparities that.
Well, that's exactly where we're headed, because the literature is very limited about what we know about school leaders. And I use school leaders to refer to principals and assistant principals because most of what we know come from principals. So we have about 6 studies in the discipline literature that have looked at principals. And principal perspective is one of the most significant predictors. So oftentimes they kind of break it down into a dichotomy of more restorative, more punitive, and we can kind of guess what the results may be. So we want to take it a bit further than that. We want to look at the interactions between assistant principals and principals. We want to look at race and gender and how that matches and how that dictates the interactions. We want to see how that influences the support that teachers may get from school leaders and so forth. So we want to really dive into what's happening at the school level between those two. The research doesn't tell us a lot. Anecdotally, we do know that the principal perspectives really inform a lot of the results that we see.
And then my last question would be, are there any plans eventually, as you look deeper, to look at, I know you looked at the ways in which areas intersect, like with race and things like that. I'm curious, particularly at the high school level, are there any plans to look at students who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and look at how that influences the process and some of their like discipline, maybe even discipline disparities with that marginalized population as well?
Well, I can if I have the data, so I can go back and see. But I don't have that identification at this point in time. But we do know from the literature that non-heterosexual youth are more likely to receive exclusionary discipline. And given that most of our trends reflect what's happening nationally, I would not be surprised if that's the case.
I don't even know if my question is for you or for Dr. Means or whomever, but when I hear 2,000 OSS suspension for elementary kids in a school year, it makes me wonder what is the experience at that school. We only have 180 school days. Somebody's living there every day. Every day. And so I'm curious as to what does that tell us about the environment in that space?
I think that's why Dr. Welch mentioned part of our messaging and communication to the community. We schedule for 176 school days, and if a child is with us from kindergarten through 12th grade, we have 2,288 instructional days with those students. So Dr. Welch's statement of we're losing thousands of instructional days for students, and in particular certain students, it's troubling. So I don't know if that.
What's the cost?
What's the cost? Well, the cost is that we're losing. So all of these presentations are connected purposefully.
Yeah.
We're losing human capital in the community
Right.
because young people are not being educated at a certain rate. So when you break down, I was just looking at the data earlier today, when you look at the gender breakdown, African American males in grades 3 through 5 are reading at 11% proficiency in our school system. So the cost is that as a community, that demographic isn't fulfilling their true potential, and then we lose.
They don't ever catch up with you.
No, they don't. They don't. And it's the same for African American females. The number of all the females, I think they made up 90% of all the females who were before an expulsion hearing of some sort last school year. 90%. I think Mr. Davis, when he went to the National School Board Association a year ago, talked about that was a theme at the National School Board Association of what's happening to African American girls. Hopefully from Dr. Welch's research, you've also heard a lot of the things that we're sharing in terms of the systems we're trying to build and operationalize in the school systems. If I may, this is also an opportunity, I do want to also thank Dr. Myers and Ms. Suggs, who worked very closely with Dr. Welch. As the board knows and the community knows, we've worked with UGA through our Professional Development School District partnership for many years. This type of professor in residence is new. And we shared with them that we needed to have a return on investment from that partnership, and so we're just very pleased that it was allowed to unfold. Dr. Welch unfortunately will be moving on to the New York University or NYU in the fall, but we hope to continue the partnership with him because I think we've just scratched the surface in terms of what we can do for our kids. This is truly one of those research projects where I think we can change kids' lives if we implement his findings and his recommendations appropriately.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Perry.
So that does actually lead right into my question. So how, and I certainly don't need specifics. I like big picture to start with, but how do you anticipate utilizing the results and suggestions from here moving forward from the research? What is the big picture look at how this will be used, how this information will be used?
I think it's informing everything that we do. So the conversation around our alternative education program has been influenced by this research of, do you continue to have a partnership with Catapult, or do we want to have educators who are looking at the work through an equity lens? I think working with our principals and asking, so what does your in-school suspension environment look like? Is it just a dumping ground, or is it a place where there's restorative practices being taught and behaviors being taught? It's influencing the principals that we hire for this year in regards to who are these people and how are they going to lead discipline. It's influencing our professional learning for new teachers going into the new year. You heard a lot of it through the human capital presentation that I made earlier. We want to employ individuals who are going to tackle this work with excitement and professional curiosity, and understand that this is it's an opportunity versus an obstacle. And it's also influencing our responsibility. You heard Dr. Welch speak earlier of, we want to strategically have the right people hired. There's been a call, and I think an appropriate call for us to have more counselors and social workers and behavioral specialists in our school system. Yes, we agree, but the answer isn't more people. The answer is the right people, and putting them in the right places, and putting them in the right places to grow capacity. Because you can just throw people at the problem, but if you're not putting the right people in leadership roles to build the capacity of everyone, we're just going to exacerbate the problem and just have more people point the fingers. I love he didn't have a chance to talk about it more, but we also have to pivot away, by building professional capacity, we pivot away from the blame game of saying, well, it's because of poverty or it's because of, we're not blaming anyone. But, and I think I tried to say it in a different way, operationalize more of, but if you're going to work in this environment, here's the professional capacity you have to have. And it's not saying that you're not working hard. We believe everyone's working hard. But to do this work and to address this disproportionality issue is not about having more people. It's about having the right people and putting them in the right place to build the capacity of individuals. It's not, I think it's fueled a lot of our conversations from that perspective.
Probably just to tack on to that for a second, it was a bit surprising to me when I spoke with most of our school leaders, and teacher preparation kept coming up. And for the board members that got to hear directly from one of our principals, you kind of hear the differences in the practical experiences. It's surprising that many of our teachers that come to this context in Clark County are probably not as aware of the challenges and opportunities that we have as they should be. So it's definitely, as we think moving forward, teachers are super important, and the blame is so much that I don't think teachers step into a classroom to ruin black children. I don't think that's happening. In my hearts of hearts, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. What I do think is happening is that they're simply not prepared. And this is what is coming from people who are observing classrooms and schools that need to do better to support our teachers.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dr. Knox, do you have a question?
Yes, how immediate will some of these changes, this is alarming on page 29. I didn't want to make a comment, but it's scary. When you look at these numbers for middle schools, and one of the schools, the number is almost double those of others. So how immediate are we looking at that particular school with addressing these things?
Immediately.
What'd you say on page 29?
Yeah, 29.
So Dr. Mattis, to expand on that, we understand that middle school is a tough age. It's become a very tough environment for us to handle. I like to call reteach behaviors. And so we need to provide, again, strategically, we want to provide our middle school principals with more resources and personnel, but in the right way. And not in a way to exclude those students, but to keep them within their school environment, but in a way where they're also teaching these students the proper behavior. Because I believe what happens is, you connect the dots to Dr. Welch's research, what happens is that behavior and the discipline increases at the middle school level, and then you see a dip in attendance at the high school level. So I believe the intersection is that those students become so frustrated that they then they start to self-select themselves out of our school system as a result.
In terms of student teaching, I know yesterday we heard that the curriculum has changed some with the student teachers and at UGA in particular, and several, I don't know what the percentages of those students who actually become teachers. I know it used to be a lot. So is there any discussion with the faculty there in terms of really looking at our needs and those student teachers, where they have more than 2 weeks of being in the classroom and getting to know how important it is to know about our demographics and working with our students?
Dean Spangler and the rest of the College of Ed have been very open to this discussion. They are very aware of Dr. Welch's research. We're continuing to have that conversation. Obviously, we are one of their main partners with placement of their students. And we want those graduates to stay in our school system if they understand the full context of what they're getting into. So we're continuing this conversation.
Dr. Gannon, you have something else?
Yeah, I was just gonna,
And then we'll move to Dr. Berry and move on down the
this not a question, I just wanted to say this is awesome.
It
I mean,
is.
the findings are awesome, but I think the level of detail is really what's needed. I mean, and there are so many other areas to build on, of course, not just with race and gender, and there's a lot of other areas, but I really think this is a great start, and it's consistent with what we know in the literature, and that is you have to take a realistic look at where we are, and I don't think we've done that to date, like in this rigorous of a fashion, so.
Thank you. We're just getting warm. This is just a small snapshot of what's to come.
Tiny question about the middle schools and on the high school. The populations are roughly the same across the 4 middle schools.
Yes.
Okay, so the discrepancy in the numbers has nothing to do with the totals.
Well, the percentage. Thank you again. Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
One question, please. Dr. Milner, did you, Welch, I'm sorry. One thing that I'm finding out is that some of our students are getting citations to court. Is that something that in your research, did you run across examples of that? Or was that, I know it was outside your purview, but.
Yeah, I didn't get data on that. With regards to that, I would say that less than 5% of our offenses are in that serious violent realm. So when we talk about expulsions, assignment of alternative schools, your possession related, your weapons related, that really isn't where the bulk of our infractions are. But I didn't come across citations.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just have a real quick.
Okay.
Page 29, the percentages in your report, what are those percentages of?
Page 9.
29.
29. So percentages under the count are, I think the percentage of, yes, the percentage of what the incidents are district-wide.
Okay, district-wide. Thank you.
Thank you again for all the fantastic work. Sad to see you go.
So we're gonna have a brief report on disproportionality if there's time.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
I invited.
Maybe, I'm sorry, maybe if the board wants to take a brief breaking for
I think
the
if
start.
if we take a break, then we lose people.
Okay.
And lose
I just,
visibility that
all the
people-
further
They'll roll
Just
in,
keep going?
if Someone needs to roll
Okay.
out. That's
Yes, sir.
absolutely okay.
Yes, sir.
I have invited Rebecca Sartor and David Brown to join me this evening. They both serve in the capacity of coordinator of behavior supports. They co-coordinate, I guess was what we would say. And so I believe that their work is, you know, their hands are their hands are in the middle of all this. And so I just thought that it would not be good practice to come and present this information without them being part of it. Same visual that Dr. Means has shared with you in a prior presentation, but just want to point out the connection of what we're about to share with you, that all of our information, all of the work, and kind of the next steps is embedded into the same framework. So we're focusing on high leverage practices, social emotional learning, as well as using data-driven information and collaboration to inform those other areas.
So one of the things we really wanted to talk about are what are the strategies we're using? How are we actually really coordinating our efforts to reduce dispro in Clark County? So one of the things we've talked about and you've heard is that last year we increased the behavior specialists from 6 to 9, and you've heard that we're going to increase it again. So with that move from 6 to 9, we've noticed that we've been able to reduce the ratio of how many schools each behavior specialist serves. So there are actually with a smaller ratio, that behavior specialists are able to give more attention to each school. We focused on integrated practice on Tier 1, those best practices at Tier 1 that all students are able to receive the best practices across all schools, while also supporting students that are having high behavioral needs. So we're hitting the students across that all students get, but we're also able to help kids who are moving into crisis who need higher levels of behavioral supports. And with that, and with our extra people that we've put into place, we've expanded our supports to meet individual needs, and we have served, with the data we've collected for this year, over 100 more teachers have received direct support from our behavior specialists, and over 300 more students have received direct support from our behavior specialists with the increase in our behavior specialists.
And that's just a comparison from last year.
That's from last year to this year. And so that's with our data. So we're really happy with that. We also, to continue with that focus on those Tier 1 strategies. That's that best practice that we want to see happening in every school, across every building, and every classroom, so that hopefully we can start seeing some consistency when we walk into different schools. So one of the ways that we're trying to work on that is we're doing walkthroughs where we focus on specific praise and feedback. Because we're hearing those specific praise and we're hearing good feedback between adults and children, we're assuming that's helping build those relationships that we've been talking about. We also focus on high leverage instructional practices and engaging lessons, because we must make sure that kids are really, really interested in what's happening in there. We have high expectations for all of our students, and we want to be able to see that. We also want to include the whole child approach. We want to make sure that we're looking at Tier 1, that all Tier 1 practices are also including a trauma-sensitive lens. We're using restorative practices, and we're using we have cultural competencies. We had that, we've also really increased our school and community partnerships. There's been our community forums that we've had so many of those this year. Town hall meetings, the meetings that we even just had yesterday. I think that that's really helped build a lot of information with the community and the schools to figure out what we need to do to help support our schools and our students. And finally, of course, as we're also working individually, one-on-one with teachers and with students, with schools and administrators, we also want to do whole professional learning so that we're all moving in the same direction. So one of the things with that we offer is professional learning on de-escalation and crisis management. We use a curriculum called Mindset Curriculum. We do trainings on PBIS and trauma-sensitive approaches. I want to say that we present it and we also receive it. So we're also learning constantly and presenting it constantly, so we're all building our capacities in these areas. Also with restorative practices, and then specially designed instruction for all teachers certified to teach special education. So those are some of the ways that we have been working, some of the strategies we've been using to reduce disc growth.
And so I think what you've been hearing a lot about our data-driven collaboration. I mean, obviously we're entrenched in data all the time. Data changes daily, and we're looking at it daily, weekly, monthly, and trying to examine trends. And then, of course, what does that really look like? How does it become past a number? What does this mean for each individual student? I think somebody asked earlier, if you look at a referral, dig down deep. Well, what's on the paper? We look at that. And we look at it in some of these sessions where we meet sometimes weekly or monthly with administrators, social workers, counselors, interventionists, instructional coaches, and that's a collaborative process because each of those people bring skills to the table and allow us to go through a problem-solving model. We do a suspension review process, which was previously just focused on special ed. We do that for all students at each school, and we hit certain metrics. And then of course we send data to schools. Obviously, they can look at their and generate their own data, but then we make sure that they are sent and receive certain data that we feel like is important to talk about. Some other things that we've tried to do this year is increase the continuum of supports. And some of these programs, while Compass existed before this year, the RISE program is new this year. That's providing us some different opportunities and different ways to approach students with certain interventions. And then, of course, you've heard earlier today about behavior analyst support that are provided to students in schools this year. A lot of that's been focused with the RISE program, but they have seen time with other schools in the district. And then, of course, we continue our focus on equity. We try to incorporate that into our conversations on our team and with the schools that we're supporting. And then, of course, you said we're receiving training and issuing training on restorative justice and that framework.
This first bullet point I want to point out, our information picks up where the last report ends. And so I want to point out that the district has reduced their behavior referrals by 3,000 from last year to this. So we are projected, last year we had 11,000-ish referrals. I don't have 11,000. And this year we're slated to come in at 3,000 less. Those are individual discipline referrals. That's something I would like to recognize. But with that also means that students, we're not saying that the behavior is totally addressed or that interfering behaviors are gone or that our students have all the skills they need to be successful, but we are saying that they're remaining in the classroom. And so this slide, cause and effective strategies, so yes, we have lots of strategies to reduce disc growth. But the more you meet kids where they are physically in that classroom, and the more that we, use that opportunity to address their needs in a non-exclusionary manner, the more that the behaviors have to be addressed where they are. And so the cause and effect of that will be that we have an increase in the number of students that are witnessing interfering behaviors of other students while we work to teach appropriate behavior. Because our focus has been to meet the kids where they are physically and emotionally, okay? So we also, and you've heard this, like all of these reports they're just, I didn't see the last report before this one, but I sat in the back, I thought, boy, this is lining up like we co-prepared them. We need our teachers to have skills. So because of what we just spoke about, our teachers, basically, we have to have an increased focus on making sure that they are prepared to meet the needs of our students' ever-changing needs, and the increase of challenge in basically what they have to do to address the students and to meet the needs of all learners in their classroom. So those are real challenges that we continue to face while we work to build students' both academic and social emotional learning competencies.
So before you move on to the reality of that statement for you as a board member, is that when you're in a community and a parent pulls you to the side and says, why hasn't that student who continues to throw chairs in the classroom, why isn't that student gone? I don't know if you've received any, I don't know if you've received that or anyone's pulled you to the side to say that to you at all. But what Ms. Hill is sharing with you is that if we're trying to teach that behavior and change the behavior of that student and reduce the number of infractions, it may mean that those students are staying in school. And it may mean that we're working with that student while others are seeing a poor behavior. And so we wanted to share this cause and effect slide with you to say that while the numbers may be down in certain areas, an effect of it, a consequence is that we are exposing behaviors that no one wants to expose children to, but we are exposing children to those behaviors.
So when the state of Georgia looks at disproportionality, they're currently looking at these five areas, and we just kind of looked at all, our black students. That's where we've been disproportionate. That's what we've been talking about, right? And so anytime the number's over 3, the state says, hey, you're disproportionate in that area. So we look at all discipline referrals. We look at ISS less than 10 days, OSS less than 10 days, ISS more than 10 days. And then, of course, we start looking at students with 10 or more days of OSS. And we try to look at some of those trends, which I think you saw a great deal of those. And you can see some of the areas where we're struggling, some of the areas where we're improving. And I'd love to answer that question.
I just want to know what SWD stands for.
Students with disabilities.
Okay.
Are there any questions about this chart? Yes.
Yeah, well, I guess that chart, not directly, but before that, it was 3,000 less over the past year. 3,000 less referrals compared
Yes.
to last year, which I'm assuming may be related to the ratio, the discipline ratio, maybe. But one of the suggestions from the report was that there are innovative things done when it comes to reducing dispro and just discipline disparities. And the truth is, we don't really know what those innovative things are yet. It's going to take more work. What has been done, because I know that you all are stretched to capacity, and so I guess my concern or question is well, how do we know that people aren't just being told not to write people up, and that there's no innovation, because you all can't be in every school, every day.
We can't be in the school every day, but I think we're embedded in the process. And with the increase in the numbers, we're seeing, it's not just did I read the writing on the referral, I was there when it happened. And not every case, not every time, but sometimes when you're getting calls as board members, we're already there. Or I hope that's the case, and we've already been there before you get a call, but and you're absolutely right, we don't have all the answers. We're still in the process of figuring a lot of things out, but when we deploy and we work with over 100 more, interacting in Tier 1 practices with over 100 more teachers this year than we touched last year, we're helping them better their practice. I can write a Tier 3 plan, I can write a behavior plan, but if the students don't have access to that Tier 1, then we've really taken that approach. And we're not where we need to be yet. We're in process, and we hope to swing some of this momentum into next year.
And one other thing too, with our increase with behavior specialists, if we're not in there, somebody else. And so when we're having continual contact with behavior specialists that are working in every school, we attend monthly meetings. They attend it with the principals and the administrators to go over discipline referrals. people are keeping an eye on it and talking about it, and so then we're brought back into, so we're looking at it in multiple ways.
And it's not just our team. We want to work in, and there's a slide on here talking about the collaboration with social workers and the counselors and the instructional coaches and administrators, so that at any one given time, there is somebody present to be part of that problem-solving team. And that's a big force that we have barely tapped the power on yet.
Since we're already asking questions, one thing that I'm still confused about is, we developed RISE, but it doesn't seem like, and I think what Heidi and I talked about this, we're not serving that many students, and and given how many middle schoolers are getting OSS, I'm just trying to me there's a disconnect, and I know you tried to answer it for me, but I think you did, or somebody tried to answer it for me, but I don't really get it. I don't understand why, because I walked into the RISE class and they had one student, and they had 3 staff members. And so I'm just trying to understand, because it seems like a great program.
And currently, we have 6 students.
Yes.
6 students enrolled in that class. And it just was kind of how it washed out that particular day. It is, the other piece is, when you reference middle school, that's a program designed for elementary.
No, and I meant elementary school.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I
Okay.
said middle school, I was wrong.
Okay.
I knew it was middle school. I mean, elementary.
It's late.
Yeah.
So really, we are beginning to have conversations about what that model looks like next year, about, how can we determine the student, about how we can maximize that. And so we, the day that I had the pleasure of walking you around, that was one, I totally said, this isn't working.
Right.
We are not maximizing, we're not leveraging this, it's not working. And so we're already in the process of seeing how we can better serve our kids.
I think part of this, Mr. Davis, I'll answer it a different way, plays into everything else that we've discussed as a governance team. A lot of this falls into our facility planning and how much where are the facilities? Currently, the RISE program is 1 classroom at Gaines. But as we've talked earlier, Gaines has a number of trailers located at that school. It's one of the 5 schools where I've identified we need to put an addition on the school. And so for us to take a classroom there, I think it's concerning. So that's part of the conversation. I think another part of the conversation is what Dr. Welch mentioned earlier, which is having the right staff work with the children. We're very sensitive of identifying kids for RISE, students for RISE. Right now it's a 3 through 5 model, third grade through 5th grade. But we're hearing from our building principals and assistant principals that we have children at the kindergarten through 2nd grade level who would qualify and could be well served in that RISE model as well. So then when you start thinking about the possibility of more students, you want to be innovative, but at the same time, you don't want to pull students away from their home school environment. It's a struggle of, are we doing the right thing for kids? Because I'll speak for myself, but I think I can speak for our team. We don't want to segregate kids and exacerbate the problems that we're seeing by segregating those students and placing them somewhere else. But I'm equally sensitive to the families who call me, call you, and will say, why does my child have to watch your team teach a different behavior for a student? It is frightening for them. That's not what we see in our household. I have to now try to explain that to my child. So to find that middle ground is difficult. And we're continuing to have those conversations. We think that the first step is to try to get more people on Rebecca and David's team to help build the capacity of our teachers. We think that's the first step. If that doesn't work, then we do need to explore other methods. And so that's what we're struggling with internally as we continue to work with Dr. Welch's research and recommendations and continuing to try to be innovative.
So is there room for RISE, or are we still in the middle of trying to decide?
I think it's more of the larger equity question of, if you create more classrooms for RISE, unfortunately, we believe that it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we create more room, if you build it, they will come. The principals will identify students And I'm not saying that those students should not be identified, but they will be identified, and now are we helping segregate kids based on their behavior? And as we've heard through the research all night tonight, and we know that those kids are gonna fall into certain demographic groups as well. So are we exacerbating the problem? It was interesting, you heard it last night at our listening session. One community member made the statement of, it depends on how we message that work. And if we message the work of, let's try to get these students what they need as soon as possible, so then they can come back to a classroom and be mainstream and learn to read on a proficient level, then maybe we've helped the community versus continuing to just Band-Aid the situation. If you remember that statement, which I thought was very insightful. But if you also remember from the conversation, and I hope you're gathering this, these conversations are uncomfortable at times. That's why I'm so honored to work with the team that we have, because they're tough. And these people go out, and their team, they go out and they sit down with classroom teachers who have had a traumatic experience. And they have to talk somewhat about race. And they have to talk about the context of where they're working. Those are tough conversations, but we're having them. A lot of school systems talk equity. A lot of school systems say, yeah, we believe in equity. We're actually trying to make this work, and we're struggling with some hard conversations of what's the best service delivery model for kids. How innovative do we want to be? That's why it's really critical for you as a Board of Education to know this is what we're struggling with on a daily basis. And this is the work that we're really trying to wrap our arms around, because we know, and you heard it through this team earlier, there's a direct correlation between Tier 1 instruction. And again, just for everyone's knowledge, Tier 1 instruction is the instruction that the classroom teacher provides to all the students before they get pulled out for EIP or for special education or for spectrum. The better that Tier 1 instruction is, we believe the less behavior issues you're going to see. When Tier 1 instruction is great, we know kids are active, they're moving around, and you're handling behaviors in a different way. And so there's a direct correlation between the capacity of our teachers in many areas. And again, this is not to blame anyone, but to say we need people at a high level to deal with the complexity of the type of students that we are serving.
How equitable is it when for teachers to have a certain number of students who may be labeled that might have issues? You know, like I know of some teachers who in the school they are that teacher. Might be, you know, some might think because they're black they get all the black boys who are trouble. So how do we work to make sure that we distribute this to all teachers that maybe have better classroom and learning environment? Because I'm more concerned about if you have too much disruption, the children not learning anything. If it's, you know, if you demonstrating how students, you know, how they're behaving, but they're not learning. So how do we work to distribute that so that all teachers in a grade level receive these students? Break it up. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know how else to say it. It's what it is.
So, may I take a stab at that?
Yes, sir.
That's a hard, yes, you're right. You didn't have to say it so quickly. I think, Dr. Mattis, I think building principals do lean on their more skilled teachers to handle those students. And it's disproportionate. And it's not fair. Those teachers, every once in a while, when I walk through a school, will say, when do I not get that caseload? I think Mr. Worthy mentioned it in a certain way. It moves up the K-12 model, where your more veteran teachers are the ones who teach the advanced placement courses, and it's your brand new teachers who are teaching the entry-level freshman classes. I think we have to put systems in place. So we've put a system in place where I'm sitting down with each secondary principal, for example, to say, so who are you assigning to certain classes? And let's look at the teachers and make sure that we're not placing our first through third year teachers with certain kids. I think it's going to require us being more deliberate with our school communities. So we know, boy, I apologize to anyone named Freddie in this community, but since we've been using Freddie, I think we have to do a better job in communicating. And so if you know as a principal, I did it as a principal, if you know you have 2 or 3 Freddies in the classroom, it's just only fair to write a letter at the beginning of the school year to that entire class to say, it could be an interesting year. And so let me tell you the support systems we have in place. But if your child comes home and describes certain things, I'm going to try to be out in front of it and communicate to this class community. We don't do those things right now. And so what's happening is that families feel that they have to use another channel to communicate their frustration. So when a child does throw a chair and we have to move all the kids out of the class, it's the parent grapevine that starts to work. We have to be more proactive about it. I'll come back to your very direct question. The more we can build the capacity of other teachers, the more likely we will stop, I hate to use the word, but lean on the ones who do have the capacity. We have to grow the capacity of others to say, eventually, this is what we're going to do. I think I shared data with you in February where we looked at our MAP data. I sat down with every principal. We went by grade level and looked at how each teacher in a grade level was performing. And virtually every school, you go to a grade level, you will see red. And I would say, wow, what's happening here? And they would say, oh, and this is where we have to change the mentality. The principals would say, oh yeah, but that's the class where I placed X amount of kids. And so we know that that's part of we're not living up to that instructional, that CCSD promise by using that. We believe we can build, when we build capacity of everyone, we can eliminate that problem. Right. Everyone should get one, right? Everyone should get a credit.
But there is, I mean, the thing is though, if you do collaborative teaching, you do end up, if based on what Dr. Welch found out in terms of the special needs children, they tend to be concentrated so they get the academic support that they need. So that's something too that from the outside people may not be aware of.
I think the thing I'm most proud of is that we are at least having a very direct conversation. Where in most school systems, we're avoiding the discussion. And we have people who are passionate and believe in this work as well. I think eventually we'll get to a place where capacity will grow and this will change. But it requires us to really be steadfast and staying true to the conversation. And utilizing some of the research that we've received and some of the new structures we're putting in place to bring an equity lens. So remember that slide I shared with you earlier of those are the 3 things we're asking all educators to do. If we can keep that expectation and make sure that all educators are doing that work, I'm confident, and they're doing this work, that's tied back to equity, then I'm confident that we can turn this around.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, everyone got a snack? We good? Get blood sugar high? If you need one, just
It was necessary.
wave your hand before you pass
It was a long
out.
day.
We're gonna move on to section I. This is our consent agenda. These are items that are proposed to be included in our consent agenda next week. The first of which is the approval of field trips. We have 3 field trips there. There's if I could just take 1 minute, as you talked about this lens of equity, and I think that these field trips are really kind of one of those places where the rubber hits the road, and I think there's, in these 3, there is one that does it really well in terms of, and I think one that maybe not so well, and it has nothing to do with the people or the act, but in terms of the language that was used in the thing. And I'm just looking at the ROTC it talks about the cost. It's not a big cost, $25 per student, but it says explicitly, students will not be prevented from attending if unable to pay the fee. And there's another one that says there's cost of $200, and it says, all it says, the payment plan is offered, there may be scholarships. I just don't think we know what that means in terms of whether the money is gonna be a prohibiting factor for students to be involved or not. So I just wanna keep putting that little flag in the ground.
You're right. Thank you.
So should we include those in the consent agenda? Is that all right?
Consent.
Okay. We have the approval of the annual renewal of NWEA measures of academic progress assessment system for grades K through 8. Any questions?
I would just, I might not, I don't know, I haven't had a chance to look at it, so I'm asking it to be pulled, you know, because I spent so much time on other stuff. So, I'm just asking.
You do not want it to be part of the consent agenda?
Right, I want to have it, so if I have questions next week, they will be appropriate.
Okay.
And I have no particular question, just haven't looked at it. And there's a lot of content here.
That's, okay. And I think we need consensus in order to put some on the consent agenda, so unless we, if we don't have it, that's fine.
Can I ask a question about it right now? or should I
Yes.
wait until next week?
No, please.
This
We should-
letter.
we should engage this issue
letter
in the
that
most
says, dear
extent
parents
possible."
and guardians, when did that go out? Did that go out? I don't remember ever seeing it, I guess is my question.
I asked Mr. That's a great question. I asked Mr. Bartleman to create this letter about a month ago. And so I would like to have this letter distributed to all families starting next school year, to let families know what is this assessment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm.
And I think it's too much still, and so if we can pare it down, we can and will. It's still a lot, but I wanted him, I asked him to craft a letter through the lens of a parent to understand what are we taking their child through when going through math testing.
Thank you.
So that hasn't gone out?
No.
So, okay, so that's.
That's the quick answer, yes. Sorry for the long answer.
The next item we have is the approval of the annual.
And just, if I may,
Yes.
if there are any questions, I will.
I will ask you ahead of
What
time.
we can even do is try to arrange a time for board members to meet with Mr. Bartleman next week if you have questions prior to the board meeting. But as always, if you have questions, please forward them my way. We'll try to get we'll get all your questions answered before next week, Thursday's meeting.
And always, as always, the sooner the better, right? The sooner we're able to dive in and digest all the stuff in our packet, the better. The next item, number 3, is approve the annual renewal of ECRA Group Data Dashboard and Local Growth Model. Yes.
I just had a couple of questions. So ACRA is, who are they? Just so we're clear, are they related to any of the other groups that we have? Or are they just standalone?
It's an organization.
Okay.
So help me understand the question more. Are they related to what organization?
Well, I know we've done a lot of contracts with groups. I just didn't know if they were related to any of the other groups we have contracts with.
They are part of, or the same owners are the ones who did the superintendent search.
Was that, I mean,
Yeah.
if you have a concern, articulate the concern. Because I think, Hazard Young and Atia and ECRA, they've been, that was part of even the contract when we hired them back when we did the superintendent search.
Okay.
I mean, let's just put our finger on it.
Okay. I just wanted all the board members to know.
Then we can say it rather than ask it.
I wanted to make sure I had it right.
Okay.
I might be mistaken.
And so what is this? This is
It's the dashboard.
So they actually, So there's two,
Yes.
so this organization, ECRA, is more of their analytic side of the house. They also, ECRA, my understanding, purchased Hazard Young and Atia, which is a search firm that does superintendent searches. But they're two different organizations.
But John, I definitely want to give you space to talk about any concerns you have with the fact that ECRA and Hazard Young and Atia are part of the same
I just want to make
company.
sure that I understood that correctly. It's been a while. I mean, that was a while back when we did that.
So no concerns?
I do want to see the dashboard. So can we look at it?
Right now? We have it. We've
Sure.
been using it for the last, how long?
Yeah.
Well, I've seen it, but I don't understand exactly what.
I sent you the link.
I don't think
It's
what I
on
see
your email.
Yeah, what I-
Well, if you can pull up your part.
That is.
I just personally, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I need to see it. I would like to see it.
I think we can't call it up right now. It's open to, it's available to the
Yeah,
public.
I'm not sure how you access it. How do you
I think it's actually on our webpage.
It is.
Under board?
I don't know what link it's connected to,
Dr. Knox sent me the link, that's why that was assigned
Yeah.
as.
Sure.
It came from Kara. It came from Kara. I didn't remember.
Yeah.
but, so.
So you could just scroll down.
And I think if you click one of the tiles, it then gives you more data. I think this one's been provided to the board once it was created back in November or so.
You sent it in your December.
Yeah,
It was in the December email with the evaluation.
Lynn, where is it on the website?
Did you scroll down? Sorry.
You're fine. Does anyone know where where's that?
It's kind of hard. I searched for it, I couldn't find it, but I was,
Yeah.
luckily Carol sent it to me, but it's not easy to
It'd be nice
find.
to, if we're gonna use it, it'd be nice to feature it more prominently someplace on that
What,
website.
under,
Look at that. Wolf out there.
All right, I know that's on your Facebook page.
I'll find it online and tell you where it's out, or I'll get it,
Would you just show the rest of the dashboard?
Yeah.
But I think this is helpful. I mean, we can also make it more prominent on the website. That's easy.
Yeah, if you could
Yeah.
scroll down.
That's
And this
Strategic
particular data is
dashboard.
like, uploaded, or it just sort of, they pull it from?
Actually, James has to pull it, and then he provides it to.
Yeah.
And then they're the host of the dashboard. Candidly, is not the best of their tools that they provide. This is not, it's okay. They do there's two other components to the work that they provide to us. One is that they provide a propensity rating. In other words, they can predict how a student should perform from one year to the next. So you should be able to look at a group of students or an individual student and predict from the propensity of their growth, how far should they grow within one school year. This is really important, and we've trained our principals and assistant principals in this to say, just because you have a high achieving student, if you're not reaching that propensity rate, you're not reaching the full potential of the student. So that's one component. The other is that we've worked with a team of our administrators and specialists to create what I consider to be, I call it, for lack of a better term, a baseball card for a student. So there are tiles, so we could say, here's Greg Davis, and it has all of his information on one screen for a teacher. It will tell you how he's performed on standardized tests. It has the ability for us to have a written essay uploaded to his tile to say this is what Greg wants to be when he grows up. It has the ability to show his disciplinary file. I call it a baseball card because if you were a collector of baseball cards when you were younger, you would get a card and you could flip it over and say, here are the main statistics of a student.
So we have that?
And so they have built that for us, and it's in place through this contract that we're asking you to consider this evening. So this is the low-hanging fruit of the 3 tools that they provide us from a school improvement standpoint. This has been created since December, but it's the propensity tool that they provide, which is very high level from a statistical standpoint. And then there is the student profile that we are able to create for each student in our organization in regards to who is this student, not only from an academic standpoint, but from a social-emotional and co-curricular perspective.
And that's included with this, the price is included with this?
We get those 3
Okay.
items for the $96,000.
This is really good because we had talked about that, again, talking about new experiences. That whenever I learned that the test fees for 4th grade was every year's 4th grade, not 4th grader, and then next year how they progress, we never really measure that progress. This is that tool that's gonna give us that ability to do that and be able to predict. I'm really excited about that.
It is a 1 screener. So if you are a 5th grade teacher and you have 22 new 5th graders, you can go on this tool and you can read 1 screen versus having to go through a lot of different files, either electronically or in paper form.
So just one more question. So the data on here, is this district-wide? And so there are other tools that drill down more, is that right?
With this tool, I believe we have the ability to even drill down to the school level.
Oh, we did somewhere.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
So if I click,
Like, I didn't see, but that's why.
I don't think it's active now, but it has
that
been.
spreadsheet that we got here.
I don't know, I found that at some point. and
I think tomorrow morning we'll work to make sure that it's more prominent on the website.
I don't know how I found it.
Is this something we'd like to include in our consent agenda for next week? Or pull from the consent agenda? I'm sorry.
I think if we could make it more prominent for the public, that would be great, so that people can know this exists and that this is part of, we're making an investment and here's the return on the investment. So, in a way, pull it from the consent agenda so we can show it off.
I feel like it's one of those, I guess I'm showing myself in terms of my ignorance, but I think it gives me a chance to look at it and perhaps ask questions next week of it. Not of the contract, but just, if I understand what this program is.
Okay.
Dr. Means, will the social emotional part be added at the end of this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there, because there's the contract part and then there's the understanding and using the tool and putting the tool part out there, is there any other ways to think about how to really engage with the tool?
Yeah, I think probably I would need a workshop eventually, but, yeah. I think you're right. I think I need additional training for it,
Okay, so we'll go ahead and pull this one from the consent agenda. We have, next one is substitute teacher contract. Any additional information, or should we include that in the consent agenda for next week?
And so what this was trying to find a better
Dr. Meeks?
vendor.
This is an opportunity for us to try to do substitute teaching in a different way. This organization would go out and they would recruit the substitute teachers. They would provide health benefits for the substitute teachers, which we don't provide. In essence, it takes us out of the recruitment process of
So
trying to
currently
find.
we're doing it all.
We're doing it all right now. And there's levels of guarantees that they provide to us if we are able to partner with them. The traditional way, when there was an abundance of teachers or people who wanted to work with children, was that school districts found their own substitute teachers. That's not the case anymore. You need organizations that are going to make this their number one priority. And we went through an RFP process, and this organization seems to be the right fit for us.
Do you have a sense of whether, with the cost of the vendor selected, is this, an investment of additional dollars, or we end up saving dollars on time and all that sort of stuff? Do you have a sense of that?
We will save time and we're not investing new dollars.
Yes, yes.
I'm sorry.
They're paying a premium, we're paying a premium on the sub rate. So our subs will get the same amount of money that they're currently making, and they will also keep our current subs until they prove that they are not worthy to work for them, just like anybody else. But it's like
The bill rate, yeah.
26%, I believe is what it was. And we pay about $800,000 a year right now on subs, so 26% of that, we budget around $1 million for it in total, for our subs in total.
And I guess in terms of, but we don't have to do the administration time, the administration cost of this thing. Now it all happens.
Right, this is, the big benefit to this is for our classroom teachers and our administrators in the building. So we have about a 60% fill rate right now, so every day, administrators are scrambling to fill 40% of our classrooms, and the teachers are having to cover for their colleagues, and everybody's really stressed out about this. It's a big issue for us right now, and this is the best solution we can find to solve that problem.
So we don't do sub finder anymore?
We do,
We do.
but we're getting about a 60% fill rate on that.
So Lynn, so with this, they pretty much guarantee that if we need a sub, we can get one. Is that?
Right, they're able to flex a little bit better than we do. They offer incentives. If you take so many jobs, they'll put you in a drawing for a flat screen TV. They want to work with us. You know, they want to partner with our schools. They are telling me that our principals will know who they are. They will assign someone to us. It's an interesting relationship, because I couldn't quite figure out what can they do that we're not doing. But they're also, if they see that this coming Friday, it's 80 degrees and it's not raining and our subs are in high demand, they will pay a premium for people to come in. So they're able to flex a little bit more than we are. And so we're very hopeful. They're telling us we're going to be up in the 90%. So we're anxious to see that.
Sweet.
If I could just be clear, the people that are currently doing the laborious recruitment of the subs, who does that fall on right now in our
It
district?
is coming out of HR. We do a monthly posting for substitutes, and then we bring them in for a half-day training. We have a consultant that comes and does that, and then we take them through the hiring process just like all of our other employees.
So it's all the HR people?
It is.
So I just want to know who's going to breathe a sigh of relief.
Right.
So it's HR.
Well, it really,
Well, also-
the side of the relief is the schools.
And the schools.
And the schools, so the principals? or
And the teachers.
The principals
Teachers,
and the teachers.
that they're recruiting their own?
Everyone, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I think that's important.
This is
for
a
everybody.
morale issue more.
Oh, sure.
It sounds really, it sounds,
I know.
it sounds really
No.
low hanging fruit, but
Well,
teachers are telling me that they're burned out when they have to cover
Yeah.
for their colleagues.
No, I understand. Since Charles tells some family anecdotes, my father was a pastor and our organist died suddenly of a brain aneurysm. And my dad had to find an organist virtually every Sunday for over a year. So I know what this looks like. I know how hard that is. So this is great. This is really good.
Go ahead.
Quick question. And I think from what's inside of what was included here was the summary of the RFP results. Like, to what degree were we able to get an idea? It looks like these are like staffing businesses. What degree were we really able to get an idea of, like, their knowledge of our city and our culture and the climate, and, and because that relates to the people that, we are trying to recruit and things like that.
There were several different companies, as you can see, that responded. Some of them, this is their job. They only do substitute teaching or substitute staffing for an education for a school district. They'll do custodial and school nutrition and stuff like that as well. But there are also, like Kelly Staffing is in there, and they do all staffing, if you know them. So that was important to us first, to get someone that we felt like really understood school districts and the needs that they have. And then, we interviewed them and we talked to them, and the company we chose currently has several contracts in Georgia, a couple around us immediately, and everyone we talked to is very happy with them. So we're confident. They talk about how they recruit. They go to ball games, they go to the rec departments, they go everywhere parents are gathered and try to recruit for substitute teaching. So.
I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Yeah, I was gonna see, and then also, I guess a follow-up question or concern. I mean, you know, I know before we talked about like the importance with RFPs and, you know, our local businesses and things of that nature. And so, you know, I do think it needs to go to the most qualified person and, you know, sort of, I trust that process. But just noting that, you know, most of these places on here, not from Athens, and we do have, I don't think that Kelly Educational Staffing is based, I mean, they're here, but they're not, yeah. But anyway, it's just something to keep, I don't know, keep in our heads.
I'm glad they're bringing perks because the last person that stopped me in the grocery store said, you know, you don't pay your substitutes enough.
Yeah, it's barely minimum wage, to be honest.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, do you think that if we paid them more, that we would, you know, because I know a few that are in Gwinnett, like they are actually leaving after subbing somewhere else. So, I mean, if we paid our subs more here.
Yeah, like would that actually compensate for what we're gonna be spending?
We raised the rate a few years ago. I don't know if any of you remember that. We did not notice a bump in a number of people that came to us. You know, more competitive with our area on sub pay. That's what we try to stay. We can't compete with that.
Yeah. Is this something we'd like to put in the our consent agenda? Is that all right?
Wait, how long
Yes.
is this contract? How long is the contract for?
1 year.
Was it in 1 year?
So we'll go ahead and include that in our consent agenda. The next item, number 5, is Georgia Power electrical line relocation costs. Any questions or comments around this? Any additional contact documents? This is just paying to move some lines. Any questions?
I did just said, you know, it's not about the lines, it's about trees. Some trees are gonna go down, coming down. Where are those, are they already roped?
They're already marked.
Yeah, that's what I saw. I saw
They're flat, there's about 15 to 20 trees along East School Road, closest to the sidewalk of the street.
Is it right along where Gaines on the rear?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I thought, I just wanted to make sure.
They're all pine trees.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, so, okay, if we include in our consent agenda? Okay. The next is intent to apply for Head Start, Early Head Start grant and budget. Okay. The next one is intent to submit a McKinney-Vento Education for Homeless Children and Youth grant. Okay. The next item, hearing no objection, is the cafeteria serving lines, Cedar Shoals High School.
That was probably in place when you were there this morning.
Probably
I couldn't resist.
I know the hours, Mike, but I just, I couldn't.
That's a softball.
We will include that in our consent agenda, sound good?
Okay, Mr. President, before we
Excellent. Yes.
leave. So for any community member who's wondering and wants to see the dashboard, if you go under About CCSD and you go down under the About portion, yep, okay. You're gonna scroll down more, okay. Yep.
There we go.
And it's gonna say strategic dashboard. And I think there was a question earlier related to what about the different schools? It's called buildings, but if you go to this corner that says buildings, you will see, it will show you, it'll show you all the different schools. So that's where it's located. I'll work with Miss Mary Walsh McGuire to make sure that it's more prominent in that About CCSD line, but that's where that information's been since December.
Okay. You have a question about the consent?
Well, sort of about two of the things on consent.
Yes.
We may have already requested this, but if not, is there any way that we can get like a summary of all of the like RFPs and contracts and like who they are allocated to, does that make sense?
No.
It doesn't?
So you
Like-
want a list of all the RFPs that are currently out for the school district?
They are, I felt like I had, is it under?
Veronica, where is it?
Ms. Jackson, where do we list all of our RFPs?
On the public interest right there.
Public interest?
Yeah, go over.
Public, go up.
No, not public relations.
Public interest. There you go.
There. Purchasing bids and contracts.
Purchasing bids and contracts. Go to the left.
There you go.
Yeah, I felt like I had seen something similar, yeah, just.
And then here are the current metrics.
Yeah.
And that's constantly changing, correct, Ms. Jackson?
Yeah, so like,
Those are actually coming off too.
so as they come out, like, is there a document somewhere where we can just keep it, have an idea, basically, of like
A running
big
list?
picture, yeah, of where.
Yeah, if you go back over, you see awards, and so when those come out, and when they're awarded, I put them right there, go up under, right there.
Okay,
If you scroll
perfect.
down, you can
Okay.
see the different ones there.
And how far back does that go, Ms. Jackson?
I usually try to keep them for that school year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Gay, you said you had two questions.
I did?
Yes.
No, you said it was about 2 things.
Yes, or two things, thank you. Thank you for the
Not
clarification.
We're only halfway through.
Okay.
So you're good, you don't have any other?
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
that's exactly what, I felt like I'd seen it, portions
Sure.
of it, but.
Thanks.
And I think there's, I mean, in our retreat a while back, we did have, some conversations around purchasing and whatnot, and we could figure out, I think, whether it's a policy or some way to.
Well, just as an update, I mean, because I think that's fair, I've asked Ms. Jackson, and she's worked with legal counsel to look at how can we in the future construct RFPs to consider local vendors and minority contractors for any work. And I know that they've been talking and are finalizing that process. So that hasn't gone on deaf ears at all. We're trying to figure that out.
We're actually complete, I need to send it to Dr. Myers, and let her review it, so we'll talk.
So it's taken a few months for us to work on it, but we've been addressing it.
Yeah, but it's great that it's all in one place. I didn't know that they were total up in place.
So we have a consent agenda, looks like, and then moving on to.
If I just could.
Yes.
Out of fairness, no, if the board could just please provide the questions you do have. The purpose of this meeting is for us to place items on consent agenda because you have reviewed the material. And so if there are, and typically you don't place things on consent agenda because you have questions that have gone unanswered. So if there are questions that you have that you would like answered, it would help us in our planning to know what those questions are. Otherwise, we're developing agendas and we don't know what your questions are. Because typically, and I understand that the hour is late, we're at 9:30, but typically the way that we construct the first meeting of the month is to allow you to be very diligent about your business in the second Thursday meeting. But if there are lingering questions that we're not aware of going into the second Thursday, then it puts us at a disadvantage.
And it has the potential to chew up a lot of, bandwidth. Okay, so get those questions to Dr. Means if you have them. With regard to other agenda items, we'll move on to Jay, and we added the board president discussion. I think we have a couple of questions that we need just to put our heads together and get some agreement on. I think one of them is the question around term limits. We have a policy around term limits, and the question is whether somebody who fills out the rest of my term as president would be disqualified from from, under those term limit, on the term limit policy. We have a question around timing, whether it's been out in an email in the plan to do this all tonight. We can still do it tonight, or we can do it, we can tee things up for next week, or we can do some meeting after next week. I would love to pass the gavel to somebody else, but if the board would like me to stay on for the meeting next week, I'm willing to do that. And then the third thing is around policy. We have a policy on filling vacancies, and there's been some discussion of whether we want to adhere to the letter of that policy, or we'd like to suspend the rules and do something else. And so I think does that sound like our basic decision points to make? You have an addition to the list of decision points?
Right, the resignation of the president, that's a decision too, right?
Yeah, the timing of that matters, because the timing has the potential to kick off that 5-day thing that we need to.
Right. So I just see that as a separate thing. Decision, one point is resignation of president. I just see that as a kind of a standalone. I'm talking about that in the timing question, because I think it's standalone.
We can address the standalone. When would you like to address that?
What's the question around resignation, when it's gonna happen?
I have a question about it, but also, I think the timing part is another question. I just have one question, direct question about that. So you can put that.
Let's go first.
Good.
Yes.
Great. And my question, very direct, is the timing of, well, it is a timing thing, but why are you resigning now instead of when you will resign your seat, which you had said was on May 31st?
The hope was to make this nice and smooth and easy transition, and knowing that I'm leaving, to go ahead and hand off the presidency to somebody else, well in advance of having the board having to fill my seat.
It's just very unusual, based on my experience, to
I think
usually
this is all
people.
unusual territory, but.
Well, usually people, I've been on boards where there've been resignations, where people are moving on, but usually what happens is that they resign their office and their seat simultaneously.
I'm open to all sorts of reasons and suggestions. Like there's not any funny business. You seem suspicious of it, but there's not any funny business.
I just asked a question.
I know, but you seem suspicious is what I'm saying. And so
It's just because it's unusual, based on my experience on many boards.
This is my first time being the president of a board that I am both resigning from office and stepping off the board. And so I am thinking about what makes the most sense for the board and trying to be accommodating in terms of my timeline and my flexibility. But I am open to suggestions, and I'm open to reasoning about why one thing makes more sense than others. If anybody is forthcoming with those, that would be great.
Well, if you won't be at the June meeting, we'll have an 8-member board.
Yep.
And so we could have a split vote, right? I'm not quite clear about how the voting is gonna happen, so
That's
it
right.
might make sense for you to be a part of the voting process.
That was my thought as well.
Just off the top of my head.
The counter rationale would be that since not just you, but any person that is in a leadership position on a board that then is moving on, that the people that will be serving on the board in the future should be making decisions about leadership. And that's not actually my rationale, this rationale was provided to me by a member of the committee.
So Jared shouldn't be involved in the vote for the next president.
That's the point.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not saying Jared, I'm saying that that's the experience I've had as a member of several different boards.
In this instance, yes.
It would be Jared.
In this instance, but I think it's
Cut this
important.
off. Stop it.
No, that's what we're talking about.
Can I, with the, hold on, let me find my they were here, but, so yeah, I share with you, I think, in the board, that I feel that we need more time, but I know that's not necessarily a popular view, but I just think that, and I don't know which one of the points that would fall under that you made, but I think it's best done separately.
Can we do the easy one first? I think
Oh,
the easy
yeah,
one
we
is
could.
the 6 month. We want the person to be prohibited from running again after having filled out the 6 months of my term.
No.
General, no?
Absolutely.
I think we're
I
in
mean,
agreement on
but does
that.
that mean it's just consensus, or do we have to, does that have to be supported by policy?
Our policy is not clear on that.
Right. So, yeah,
And
that's
so
what I'm
consensus.
saying.
I mean, this is.
So we would have to create
President, if I
policy.
could add, although the
Yes.
policy is silent, there is a statement in Robert's rules that in filling vacancies for unexpired terms, an officer who has served more than half a term in an office is considered as having served a full term. For whatever reason.
So this won't be a half term, so we go.
Right, so even in Robert's rules, maybe a mood issue.
Okay.
So do you think we should have to go through policy, or are you saying we can just kind of consensus it here without going through a formal policy process?
I think, again, that we have the Robert's rules, which is our deferral point. And so that maybe that even makes our consensus unnecessary at this point,
Unless you want to change it.
unless we want to change it. Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
So tell me what we just agreed on.
We agreed that whoever fills the rest of this term is not precluded from running for president in January.
Good.
The next item is a question on, can we do the one on timing? Again, I'm happy to step away now. I'm happy to step away next week, resign from office. I'm happy to resign whenever y'all want me to resign. If you'd like me to make a package deal, I'll resign from the board at the same time too. That will not hurt my feelings. The options are, again, we talked about doing it tonight, hours late.
Oh, no, we stop there.
Yes.
I don't think we can do it tonight.
Okay.
I think, given that it hinges on your resignation, which wouldn't be on an agenda, because that wouldn't necessarily be something on an agenda, and it wasn't on the agenda, then a vote for a new president is not on the agenda, and as our legal counsel said, you could do that if it were an emergency. We could vote on something if it were an emergency, and it does not seem as though an emergency, since we have all the other options.
Well, and the 5 day, you're kind of making reference to the 5 day thing. It is sort of a within 5 days thing, so, the
But I think
thought was
that's
that.
not what you were talking about, right? You were saying that we could vote, adopt or amend our current agenda to include a vote only if it were an emergency.
Well, if there's some reason to do so, that it can't wait, it can't wait. Now, the 5-day thing is a separate issue. That's your outside limit
Right.
for electing a new president once that office becomes vacant.
Right.
There's no requirement that, I thought we could vote beforehand, that just.
And if you vote beforehand, obviously you're within that limit, you're fine.
Yeah, okay, I just think that once
You
you
can do it next week.
I'm good, all right.
Okay. So in terms of timing, would you like to do it next week add it onto our meeting, or do it at some other standalone meeting? We already have a.
What's wrong with doing it next week? But you leave it in June, so you're gonna resign.
Well, it would be a called meeting if we didn't do it next week, or we
That's
could-
what I'm saying.
or we could
Why
tack
not
on
do
the-
it next week?
We could tack on the called meeting to one of our other mini meetings that we have.
Does anybody have an objection to next week,
I don't.
For what?
to do the election next
To
week?
debate,
Will there be
nominate.
nominations and election in the same?
I say they're tied together, right? So these questions of when we do it and how we do it are.
Oh, so in order to do it
necessarily-
next week, according to the email that you sent, we would have to nominate tonight. Is that right?
Well,
I thought there was supposed to be the
two
same-
different meetings,
I thought it's at the same meeting.
It's the same meeting,
For a vacancy, it's the same
For
meeting.
the, yeah.
Same one.
unless we decide to suspend the rules. The policy on vacancy policy on vacancy says that the nominations and the voting happens in the same meeting. Yeah.
Unless we suspend the rules, like you said.
So what's the board's pleasure in terms of when we do this? Are we looking at doing this in May? Are we looking at pushing this to June? What are we doing?
I say do it in May. I'm just
And
one night.
I worry
Why
about.
prolong it?
Yeah.
It's gotta be done.
Or we can make Jerry stay.
I mean, I won't say, because I don't want to,
Yeah.
I think I'm the one who's been a bit, had
No,
some reservations.
others have reservations too, so it's fine.
In my head, with how my life is going right now, I just need things to be as clear as they can. And I feel that we're still in the process of discussing so many other things and dealing with so many other issues, and those things won't stop. So I'm clear on that. But to me, our meetings are like tonight. You know, there's just a lot here. Next week, there's gonna be, there may be a lot, and I just think it's clear, if we can have it as a separate meeting, with that being the sole purpose. Not because I love meetings, but I'm one night too. But I just want to put on public record what what I already shared, my concerns were.
I don't think it's gonna be lengthy next week. That's the purpose of having the work session tonight, to filter all that out. I'm looking at, it's only 2 items that we pulled from the consent agenda. Most of this is gonna flow smoothly. Next week.
We're
Okay?
gonna have an executive session that's gonna
Oh,
go real
stay
quick.
I mean,
Why not do it next week?
I'll defer to the group.
You know,
Those are my
I
concerns.
hear you too. I mean, especially, there's I worry about that. I worry about sort of the bandwidth, the leftover bandwidth. But I can see it both ways. Anybody else have strong preferences? Whether we
I
do
feel
it
the same,
during
Mr.
our-
Keisha, but I'll go with whatever.
So your preference would be to have either separate meeting,
Yes.
standalone meeting, or maybe tack it on to one of our other meetings. We've already talked about, a retreat and different things we can tack it on to if people really wanted to. Yes.
I'll say one thing. I served as chair of a campus ministry board here in Athens, and I had to resign for essentially health reasons. And that was a long time ago. And what I did was I resigned, but I also did not take part in the selection of the next chair of that board. So my preference just procedurally has nothing to do with the personalities. Procedurally, my preference is if there is a resignation and an unexpired term, that the person that resigns does not participate in the choice of the next leader. That's what I did.
Thank you. Any other preferences on when we handle this? Whether it happens next week in the regular meeting or separate meeting?
I want everybody to know that if he leaves, I am the vice president. That means I get to run the meeting. So think about this. And think about where you really want to be.
Well, we'll still be with that mayor. I mean, we're not.
We can still do it within May, yeah.
I'm gonna support that side of the room.
Do what?
And what does that mean?
Wait, not do it next week.
So do it next week?
Not do it next week, tag it on to either a separate meeting or tag it on to one of our future meetings.
And for me, it's about it's about next week, but just the clarity, when we come together, that is the only thing that we need to be doing. But, again.
Yeah.
Well, even if we do it during the retreat, at least do it first.
Yeah.
That'll probably be best.
Yeah.
I can live with that.
Does someone just need to make a motion?
No.
Okay.
Does that sound like a good plan? I mean, we have some dates for a retreat to happen. We can tag it on to the front side of that retreat. Does anyone feel strongly about that being a bad idea? I know your preference would be to handle it, but does that sound okay?
It's on May
16th, what we're looking at. Okay. You can plan on that then.
All right.
Sound good? Okay.
Will you provide information about your resignation to the board? As, at least as president, will that information be provided? Or will that occur at that meeting? I guess that's another part of the comments.
Once I resign, then that 5-day clock starts ticking, and so, I can make that resignation 4.5 days before our,
Sure. But will you forward
Absolutely.
anything to us?
Yeah, you'll know. I'll
Thank you.
I'll make it
But you
formal
can make it
email.
happen too, so you don't have to, don't so precious about that.
Okay.
Make it happen.
Okay, great.
I think we need to give you closure, so I want you at the retreat. Yeah, that's-
We haven't gotten to the board yet.
Cool. Thumbs up, everybody happy? Okay, we have item K on our agenda. Broke the computer. Late contract extension, contract additions. Emphasis on late. Right.
And we still have executive session, so everybody perk up.
So,
These handouts, they're really good.
Any questions? We're gonna,
Just a real quick question about the late contract additions. Are there other, thank you for giving the data earlier about resignations. There's not a lot on here. Are we expecting others? I guess there will be some others maybe.
These are people that weren't on the first list of renewals that we
Renewals.
needed to add.
Okay.
These are not new hires.
gotcha.
Okay, so, yeah, but, and we don't have this month a list of, the usual list of transfers and other things, so.
We should.
Yeah, oh, that's gonna come along later.
We'll put it up for you.
We'll put it up for.
Yeah, it'll be
We'll
up
put it
by
up
next
before
time.
the- yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so look for another.
Moving on, we have our executive session. I need a motion. It's been, hold on a second, let me get my card. It's been recommended that we have an executive session for the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, dismissal, or evaluation of employees. Motion made by Ms. Davis, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Worthy. All in favor? Okay.
Yes.